Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mayor. There we go.
What a beautiful day we've had today.
It's been gorgeous, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's your spring fever going. Then it's going to get cold again. That's
Well,
what it does.
that's springtime, isn't it?
Yes. Because that's just what happens. Mayor, can we bring up the March 25th party for Kane with the council tonight? Kane knows about it, so I just want to make sure that we give them enough heads up where they can come in.
You bet. Who wants to do that?
I can if you want to. I can ask Matt if he wants to.
Okay.
I was just thinking about that since we've already told Kane. Well, we're having a little shindig for Kane on the 25th of March.
Sounds good. Where at?
It's going to be at the community center.
Cool. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun. We'll get the information out to you, but just put it on your radar.
I am in Denver right now.
Oh.
My granddaughter's first birthday today.
Oh,
Hey.
how
Fantastic.
Congrats.
So I'm in the playroom downstairs.
Okay. I love it. I think that's awesome.
We're in all of our playrooms too.
Yes. Mine is my dog's playroom. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
How are you guys doing?
How are you?
Doing well.
Paul? We're just lacking 2 city council.
Real good.
Juan and Matt, thanks for getting the virtual meeting up and running. It looks real good this evening.
They're amazing.
There's Matt Dahl. Chief Thomas and Chief Larson, welcome to both of you.
Good evening, Mayor.
We have a good number of staff already. Glad to have each one of you with us. Have we heard anything from Heidi or Dustin about being late?
I haven't. Matt, you're muted.
Oh, there's Heidi. Hi, Heidi.
Dustin should be on any moment now.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to give the council a heads up about March 25th so they have it on their radar?
Sure. As many of you may recall, Kane broke all of our hearts and told us that he will be retiring. And
I think recall is a good word. We're going to recall him.
I thought we made a motion to not accept that.
Kane used some sort of point of parallel universe in order to get around that as part of the procedure. I didn't understand it, but he said he's still going to do it, still retire. But we will be having an event for him on the 25th. The event will be from 2 to 4, and we're inviting about half of Utah. So we're hoping that we can space that out and hopefully be outside some so that we can keep everyone safe. But Kane has made a lot of connections over the last, what was the number again? 33 years?
32.
32.
But they're not all friends, probably, right?
So far, only fond memories from the people we've talked to. And anyways, and so we'll be sending out more invites on this for the 25th, but we just wanted to give you that heads up that we'll be doing that. The last council meeting that Kane will be in will be on the 16th. So those are a couple of things that we've got coming up here in the next month. I would provide more details, but we're working on some of them right now.
Yeah. Well, let's begin our workshop then. A legislative update, and I think Kane, you and Matt are going to give us the latest scoop on what's happening at the legislature in these last 4 days.
Kane, you muted yourself.
Sorry, I muted myself. You're right. Yeah, it's going to be a hectic 4 days. I think they're estimating about 200 bills are going to be heard in the next or within those 4 days of the legislative session. Many of them will be rushed through, so it's going to be we're going to have to keep a watchful eye on a lot of legislation. There's a few bills that we've worked on that were not good bills for cities, and we've been pretty successful in bottling up some of those. Two of them were held in committee yesterday. One was not even actually brought out, but it was the chair of the committee. It was his bill, and apparently got so many calls over the weekend from city officials on messing with the distribution of sales tax that he decided to pull the bill, and it wasn't heard yesterday in committee. But there were quite a few bills this week that have been that have come up. Let's see, maybe what I can do is share my screen. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
So this was the presentation from yesterday, League Policy Committee meeting. Kind of interesting. So they kind of broke down everything into groups to talk about yesterday. But here's the three principles that every year we go into the legislature with when it comes to a piece of legislation. We look at does it respect the traditional role of local government? Is the bill a one-size-fits-all approach, or does it respect that every city is unique? And will the bill result in any unfounded or unworkable mandate for the city? And so as we discuss the bills with the legislators, those are the three principles that we bring up with them all the time. There's a lot of bills that have been discussed in this legislative session that will be moved into the interim session that will begin in May. And there's a lot of, as you can see, there's a lot of bills that fall into those categories of housing, public safety, economic development, sales tax. Senator Bramble wants to talk about sales tax. I don't know why. It's just baffled me for the 16 years I've been up there, that they constantly want to mess with our sales tax distribution. It's of course they always give us, Matt and I hear this all the time. You guys we could try to compare ourselves to them, comparing themselves to the federal government. They don't like the federal government to tell them what to do. We don't like the state telling us what to do, but they say, well, we can tell you what to do because you are our, you're part of the state, and without us creating you, you wouldn't be anything. And so they're mom and dad, and we're the kids, and they get to tell us how we spend our allowance. But every year, it seems like there's a bill or bills talking about how we're going to distribute sales tax. And so that came up again. Like I said, the bill wasn't heard, but now Senator Bramble wants to discuss it again. The bill that was in the session yesterday wanted to move to a population-based distribution. So sales tax would be purely distributed out to the cities based on population, which sounds in some ways reasonable. But if they did that, why on earth would a city in any way want to have a retail center in their city and want the associated problems with crime, traffic, all those other things that are associated with having a retail center, having the sales tax on the from point of sale of 50% of that, in some ways offsets those for that city that has the retail center. So I don't know why the state legislature can't understand the fact that that's not a good idea to just distribute based on population, because I think cities will zone retail centers out, and you won't see them, and they won't be around. But there's a lot, as you can see, there's a lot of different things that we'll be discussing in the interim. As there always is, a bill comes up, it's discussed in committee, and it's discovered that the bill needs more work and more discussion, more input. And so it's kicked to the interim for discussion, and in hopes that maybe the bill can be reworked and brought back the next year. There was a couple of big transportation bills. There, as you probably read in the news media, there was a lot of talk about what can be done with the fund balance that the state has, and a good idea for them to use that money is on infrastructure, which we're in sorely need of. But there's a bill. Representative Schultz talked to the LPC yesterday about a bill bonding. The state, by and large, really doesn't like the bond. It's very difficult for them to grasp. It's kind of like we've learned that you can't keep up with the cost of inflation and construction. You can't save enough to build projects by saving. You really need to bond and get the lowest price you can, and then pay the bonds off, because we can borrow money for so cheap as a state that it doesn't make any sense to try and put money away. So he's convinced the legislature that it's a good idea to bond. There's a lot of projects. I can send you his presentation, but most of them are all UDOT projects, major projects like the Mountain View Corridor, I-15 projects, both in Utah and Salt Lake County, some up north in Davis County, some down in Washington, St. George area. But there's a lot of infrastructure that they're planning to start working on and putting money into roads this coming year. Senator Harper had the Housing and Transit Reinvestment Zone. We're supporting that. I don't think that bill has made it through yet, but it rewards cities, or provides funding for cities that develop housing and transit projects around transit zones, TOD zones. There's a lot of land use bills. A couple of them, Matt was involved with this one, Senate Bill 164, which is affordable housing, with Senator Andrigg. It's second substitute, but as you can see, the bill has been modified. There's a lot of things that the league didn't like in the bill that we're taking out. Thanks to Matt and his work on that. I think the bill is now to where the league can support the bill. It'll be interesting to see if it makes it all the way through the end. Short-term rentals. This was one that was a controversy yesterday that I listened to in committee. Fortunately, this was held in committee and not put through. The whole premise to the bill was allowing short-term rentals basically anywhere. What was brought out to Senator Andrigg is the fact that with the housing shortage, and it kind of flies in the face of Senate Bill 82 that allows for accessory dwelling units to help with the affordable housing shortage, that this would be contrary to that. More people would be out building accessory dwelling units and then renting them out as short-term rentals than they would for full-time living quarters for families and others. And so that was pointed out very clearly. The bill got held. This is a bad bill, in my estimation, because I think it, especially in cities close to the ski resorts, that's all people would do was build basement apartments and put in short-term rentals and rent them out. They can make a lot of money that way. House Bill 82, this is the one the league is finally at a neutral position on, that it allows 80 ADUs in at least 75% of the zone residential in most cities. There's a little different requirements if you're a college town, for instance. But this one is something that I've asked Alex and Nate to really understand what's in the bill, because this is a priority bill. This will it's got a very good chance of passing and making it all the way through. You can see the requirements there. There is a requirement under 6,000 square feet, the city can deny an ADU under 6,000 square foot lot. We can require a separate parking or an additional parking space for an ADU. So there's a lot of things that we were able to get into that bill to make it not so obtrusive for the cities. And Matt, you can jump in wherever you'd like on these. And then the other one,
Kane, I have a question about that before you move on from that bill.
Sure.
I obviously think even this pared down version is garbage, mostly because the idea that the homeowner is going to always live there, like there's this whole enforcement action, like the homeowner has to live there. They might start out that way, but if they move out, they might rent it out to two people. I think that's just a burden and just is not that great. That being said, if this does pass, do we want a policy already ready, or do we want our code to reflect, a lot of these to begin with? That way, someone doesn't come in the day after it's passed to say, hey, and they're under the 6,000 square feet, or they don't have enough parking, but we haven't created in our code yet to say, hey, we don't want them for under 6,000. Is there a time period that could be sort of this limbo, or is that how that works? Do you know?
Yeah, there will be an effective date on the bill. I'm not, Matt, are you familiar with is there an effective date that you know of? But usually there is a date where they require that we bring it up to standard.
I don't know right offhand, but I suspect I think it's like the typical May or June time frame. So I mean, if it passes, then yeah, we'll need to work on getting our policy in place pretty quickly to address that.
We'll have to go into our code.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the reason that we asked Nate and Alex to really go through this bill and understand what it means and what we would have to do to change our code to comply with the bill. The question's always asked, well, why don't we just kill the bill? the problem is this was a priority bill for the House and for the Speaker of the House, and he made that known. The first thing that we do is look, if it's a House bill, we look to see what the chance is of it passing in the Senate. And if it has the votes in the Senate, then we go to the governor and we see if the governor is willing to veto. In all cases, this bill looks like it's destined to be passed. But they did encourage the cities to sit down with the sponsor and work it out the best we could. And so I think the league's done a pretty good job of getting this to where we can at least have some say so. Of course, these ADUs have to be compliant with the building code and fire code and public safety issues, those kind of things.
Which the city would have to, absorb all those costs and everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the cost for the inspections and those kind of things.
Yeah, and any enforcement or anything along those lines.
Enforcement, that's going to. I think you brought it up very well. That's going to be a problem, especially that it's got to be owner occupied. It's going to be hard to understand or to know when a unit is not owner occupied, but that'll be up to the city to figure that out. But if they want these ADUs to be compliant, so that when if they go to do something with the house, like refinance or sell it, and they advertise that it's got an accessory dwelling unit apartment, then they would have to have that proof that they have had an inspection and it meets building code and fire code and those kind of things. Otherwise, the bank is going to give them problems on that. That's kind of what we've seen in the past on these. And then Senate Bill or House Bill 98 was the other one that was really a bad bill in the beginning. It's still not a good bill, but it does. We have put some language in there that helps the cities. This is on building permits and building approvals for projects. You can see there's a lot of it allows the builder to go out and hire their own inspector under certain conditions. The interesting thing is there's only so many licensed professional building inspectors out there, and most of them are working for cities because that's our job. That's what we do. We don't have in-house building officials and building inspectors, and so ours are all contracted. And so for them to go out after a certain period of time, if we don't get an inspection, them to go out and find their own inspector, that's going to be very difficult for them to do because most of them are already under contract.
Sorry, Kane, and I have a thought on that drives me crazy. If Ivory Homes was like, hey, I need this inspection done, paid for by Ivory Homes, is that inspector ever going to deny, not pass one of the largest landowner builder in Utah or Perry Home? I mean, I don't know how this isn't we might as well do away with building inspection if we're going to allow the private company to get their own. Why wouldn't they ever turn down the big boys? I don't think they ever would.
Well, and I agree with you there. And if you're under the second substitute, you can see that the builder who engages the inspector must be an independent third-party licensed inspector, and they must be insured through Doppel and the whole thing. Like I said, I don't think this is ever going to be used that much. I guess it makes them feel good, and it feels like they have not a carrot, but a hammer over the top of the city's head. But for the most part, we keep asking, well, tell us the cities that are giving you problems, and the league will work with them to try and figure out how we can get them into compliance. We can't get them to tell us that all the cities that are giving them problems. They just tell us that they're out there and they're having problems with cities. We'd like to know who they are because I don't think we fall into that category at all.
So, Kane, Two quick things. First, just going back to HB 82 really quick. Most of the items that we're primarily concerned with in that bill, it's the effective date is October 1st of 2021. Says the
Good.
bill takes effect May 5th. But the part about the internal ADU looks like that's October 1st. We'll go through and verify which sections apply and which dates, but it appears that for the more complex things, we probably have until October 1st to get those settled. The other thing I was going to say is I was in the Commission on Housing Affordability last week, and we're looking at that SB 164. And as part of that, we had worked hard to remove some language about inclusionary zoning, some stuff about RDAs. I think previously I'd talked to you guys about how there was a push in order to include in there some language about requiring cities to create segregated accounts for each of the development fees that they charge, and only pay for the expenses associated with that fee out of that account, do auditing at the end of the year, submit that to the state auditor, and creating this big process. Again, related to what Kane had said about this belief that there are all these cities doing all these sort of bad things, though they never really, the folks representing the building, the Home Builders Association stuff never really sort of cited the specifics on it, just that they believe that there are these issues out there. Anyway, after we removed some of those items, there was a representative member in there who had indicated, a House member who had indicated that he felt like the Homeowners Association didn't get anything that they wanted this year. And we had to point out to them that it looks like they're going to get 82 and they're going to get 98. And they're going to get, there's other bills that we have or will talk about where they seem to get their way. But what really seemed to happen this year is that the Home Builders Association and those sort of associated with that group were really ready for this session. I think they thought they were going to run the table, because I've been working on some bills that are pretty important, but that they were still working on sort of crafting during the session. And I think COVID had an effect on a lot of those bills. But the Home Builders Association related bills, those were crafted and ready to go right away at the beginning. So they were well prepared for a lot of these. And I guess the other reason I bring this all up is that even in the places where they've lost and things have gone to the interim session, I think that they will be equally, or if not more, prepared next year to try to get some of these things through. And so I don't think this was their big shot this year, and we'll get a reprieve next year. I think a lot of the things that aren't passing this year we'll see again, and probably with a better effort behind them next year.
Let's see, and for the sake of time, we're planning on the 16th to have Dave and Ashley Spatafor. They'll be in our workshop and they'll do a complete rundown of the legislative session. I think what I wanted to show you was, where is it? So these are the bills, the ones that we're most concerned about this last 4 days, and we're watching these very closely. There still is, we were able to get one of the billboard bills held and didn't get out of committee. Senate Bill 144 is the one that's still hanging out there. It's the worst of the two bills. It's on the third reading calendar, but we've kind of been assured that none of the two billboard bills are going to make it through the session. So we'll have to watch closely and hold our feet to the fire on those. But those are the ones that we're watching closely. And this is I'll put this presentation, I'll send you this presentation just so you have the latest update from the league. And like I said, we're planning on having Spatafors in the meeting on the 16th to do a complete rundown of the legislative session. All in all, I think the league there again has earned their money with trying to do everything they can to protect the interests of the city and especially the interests of the elected officials. I think that's the thing that we hit on the most when we talk to the legislature. We try to let them know that you're trampling on the authority of our elected officials. They they have the authority, they have the trust of the people of our community, and please don't trample over the top of them. And they seem to constantly want to do that, but then we have to get their attention and show them where they are. So does anyone have any questions on any of the bills so far? If not, Matt, unless you have anything else, the league is planning on having the mid-year conference in St. George, which is good news. They're going to have a lot of outdoor activity or outdoor sessions down there. So I just wanted to bring that up. If any of the council and the mayor staff are going to go down, they need to get registered as quickly as possible. And I believe Rory and Shelley can help you with registration for those dates. That concludes my report, Mayor.
You're on mute, Mayor.
Okay. Appreciate Kane's eyeballs on the legislation. We'll now ask Kyle to give us a rundown on the budget as to the current state of affairs there and where we're going.
Thank you, Mayor. For time, I'll just hit the highlights, and then I'll send out this slide deck also with some of the more detail that we aren't able to get to. So tonight I would like to go over the fiscal year 22 budget revenues, go over some key trends that I'm seeing and where we currently have the revenues forecasted to be for next year. So I thought I would start out with just an overall big picture view of our revenues. So I have from fiscal year 2016 over on the left all the way to fiscal year 2022, which is the current proposal amount. And then of course, what we currently have budgeted in fiscal year 2021. So I am projecting a 2%, it's actually 1.6%, but rounded up to 2% increase between fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022. Which is about $319,000. You'll see over here on the right some percentages. That's to give you some idea on what percentage of these categories contribute to the total overall budget. So as you can see, overall taxes are 69%. Licenses and permits are 4%. Intergovernmental is 12%. And intergovernmental is mainly our Class B and C road funds, and then we do get a grant from the EPA to fund a position. Further going down, just looking at tax revenue in particular, there's a lot of numbers on here. In fiscal year 2017, over here on the left, it shows what percentage of taxes make up that category. So the red, for example, is our sales tax, which is our largest percentage. So we 55% of our tax revenue in fiscal year 2017 was sales tax. It has gone up to 61% proposed for fiscal year 2022. Our sales tax has grown quicker than some of our other tax revenues, which is similar to what other cities are seeing also. Property tax, because that's another one we get a lot of questions about, was 21% in fiscal year 2017, and now it's up to actually down to 19% and so forth. So our taxes overall are seeing a 4% increase, going from about 13.4 million to about 14 million is the projection right now. A couple of the larger revenue sources for this city. So property tax is one of them, of course. We will get final numbers from Salt Lake County in June on what the exact amount is, but based off of history and some of the building that's been going on with this city, I'm anticipating about a $52,000 increase, which is about 2%. Property tax makes up about 13% of our total general fund revenues. Just as a reminder, especially if anyone from the public's listening, how the property tax revenue works in Utah is cities received the same amount they received last year plus any new growth. So if assessed evaluations of businesses and properties increase, that doesn't necessarily mean the property tax is going to increase. The rate will correspondingly decrease to make up for that. And there's a couple things, there's a multitude of things that are in the formula, but the main things are the assessed valuation of the property, and then they also factor in what our collection rate history is of how much property tax we've collected that's been assessed. On the chart here, I just did want to point out, because you notice there's quite a big jump from fiscal year 16 to 17. That is when the city did pass property tax increase. I believe it was 144%, and that was to fund public safety in the roads. I just wanted to point that out since that was a large increase. Sales tax is our largest revenue in the general fund, so I am forecasting about a 6% increase. As I said, it's about 42% of our general fund revenues. And to give you some metrics, year to date, our sales tax increase has been about 10% year over year. Meanwhile, the statewide sales tax increase has been 13%. So overall, the sales tax has been growing quite well for the state as a whole. One thing us as finance directors have been discussing is how much of this increase will ongo after the pandemic ends, and how much of it is more of a one-time thing, because people are staying home, they're improving their homes, they're buying goods instead of experiences or traveling and that type of thing. So that's one reason why the increase is quite cautious, because there is that unknown of what's going to happen in the future once the pandemic's over. Franchise tax, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I am projecting it to be flat. There are slight rate increases either proposed or passed by Rocky Mountain Power and Dominion, but we have had a history of rate decreases looking at the short-term history. One of the things that is affecting us is more and more residents are cord cutting, so they are canceling their cable service, and we do receive franchise tax from Xfinity. Same with the telecommunications tax.
Kyle,
Yes.
would people signing up for Utopia have an adverse impact on our budget then?
They would not, because internet doesn't have a franchise tax. It's strictly just cable. So
right, but a lot of people, if they switch to Utopia, might also cut their cable. Right.
That could possibly be. If they were just to switch their internet alone and keep their cable, it wouldn't have an effect. But you're right, if they just completely canceled, it would have an effect.
Okay.
Telecommunications has been on a decline for a number of years now, and that's mainly due to less expensive phone plans, more people moving to family plans. However, looking at the remittances, it looks like the decreases are starting to level out, so that's why I only budgeted a $7,000 decrease, or about a 3%. Transient room tax is one of those revenues that is going to be the big question mark coming out of the pandemic. It will largely depend on if business and leisure travel returns, and to what levels of businesses are going to feel comfortable having their employees travel. So the current projection is fairly conservative, essentially matching what fiscal year 2020 brought in, which was approximately half pandemic, half pre-pandemic. So there is an assumption some of that will return. Motor vehicle in lieu, we have discussed a little bit before. I have seen there is a proposal to bring back the renewal postcards. We have seen at the city a jump in motor vehicle in lieu since the DMV began their last campaign to try to get those numbers up. So I think that is working, and hopefully the postcards will pass, and I think that will help our renewal numbers moving forward. Business licenses, as Nate had mentioned last week during the fee discussion, The city didn't really see a huge decline in business renewals. When I was doing my initial fiscal year 21 projections, was thinking we would lose some businesses and did budget accordingly. However, I believe we can move our budget back up to pre-pandemic levels since we didn't necessarily see as many businesses not renew as we were expecting. One thing here, as Nate had mentioned, is we are working on doing a fee study RFP. So there could be interim adjustments depending on the outcome of that study. Building permits is one that we are going to budget conservatively next year. So I am reducing the budget 200,000, which is about 20% of the revenue. The reason for that is we, of course, had the Zions Bank project this year. We don't know when or if the next Zions Bank project is coming. So my thought was to be conservative and reduce the revenues a little bit. And it will also help us long-term to ease our reliance on these revenues, which we do have to treat with caution to make sure we don't end up in a bad space because of that. Class C, we didn't see a dramatic decline that we were expecting with the pandemic, so there is a slight increase of about 52,000 expected. Another one I did want to discuss, and that will require some more discussion at the budget retreat, our state homeless grant that we get from the state that funds our shelter officers, part-time victim advocate, and the canine sweeps. Our allotment is decreasing about 265,000 next year. And just kind of give you a background on that if anyone's not aware. So that formula that we receive is set in state code. So we receive about 12% of the restricted trust account on that. So that is something that will need further discussion at the retreat, but I did want to give you a heads up that was coming. And then on court revenue, we have seen some encouraging trends with revenue so far this year. So I believe it's prudent to increase our court revenues that we're budgeting back to about our fiscal year 2020 levels. Of course, that is dependent on the Justice Court fully resuming full operations. And then one thing is, while the state does have a low unemployment rate, it's not an even unemployment rate across all employment sectors. And I think we'll need to see a more full recovery in order for court revenues to increase. So finally, just a few key takeaways. We have been trying to budget conservatively because we don't know how the economic recovery will go. Sales tax has got a built-in cushion, expecting some sort of drop-off in these large increases that we've seen. Outside of sales tax, flat or slight increases on taxes. Development revenues, we are budgeting for an expected decrease because of the Zions Bank project. I did put an asterisk on here because we are looking to do a fee rate study on our development revenues. As we just mentioned, we are seeing a recovery in our Justice Court revenues, and that will need further discussion is that decrease in our state homeless grant. So overall, we will see a slight increase in our ongoing revenues. And with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions you may have or any other comments you'd like to make.
Kyle, now that you gave us the highlights, can you give us the lowlights?
Fortunately, we budgeted very conservatively during the pandemic. So really the lowlights are the development revenue. And as I said, we are looking to make sure that those fees mirror our costs. And that's why we're doing the fee study on that.
So the lowlights aren't that low and we kind of already knew about it.
Right, exactly.
Cool.
Any further questions for Kyle?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, our next item on our workshop agenda is the discussion of Chamber of Commerce. And Matt, would you introduce our guest?
Sure. So this evening we're joined with by Joe Silverswag.
The key, Matt, is confidence. Nobody else knows how to pronounce it either. So as long as you sound like you know what you're doing, I won't tell anyone.
It is one of those things, like, we've talked so often that it's embarrassing. I still get it wrong. Silverswag. And anyways, and he is a member of the Murray Area Chamber of Commerce. He had inquired about speaking to the city council about the perspective of Midvale joining as a municipal supporting member. And he wanted to have a little bit of time during the workshop in order to talk to us about that. So with that, Joe, why don't you go ahead and take it away? And I'm sorry, Joe, you were saying you were going to there was going to be someone else. We sent out that invite, but I don't know that I see.
Oh yeah, he actually, I apologize. I was Skylar, and he was unable to join us tonight. He had an emergency come up. So I will. I was planning on doing the presentation anyway, so I think we'll be just fine.
Okay, great.
Hey folks, so I'm Joe Silverswag. A lot of you know me from my work in the community and my work with Comcast. Brian, I have answers to your franchise questions, but we'll have to address them another day. Would love to come back and present to the whole city council if that's something you folks would be interested in. But I'm here today to talk about the Murray Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of directors. I've been on the board of directors now for about a year. Moved into Murray about 3 years ago and love it here. Wanted to help support my community. And this is one of the ways that I'm doing that. I was surprised to see that the Murray Area Chamber of Commerce only had one partner city in Murray, and that we wanted to add some more. And I started asking around, saying, "Hey, what's going on? How can we get Midvale and we get other cities to join the chamber?" And I learned that it's been a rough few years for the Murray Chamber of Commerce. There's been a decline, I think, in the reputation of this chamber and the influence of this chamber. And that seemed like a wonderful opportunity for me and other members of the community to step in, revitalize this real institution. It's been part of Murray for so long. Want to make sure that we continue to be a powerful force, so we take advantage of the opportunity of being in the heart of the valley. Don't need to tell you guys, as you're looking at your sales tax revenue and other commercial revenue, that Murray, Midvale, here at the crossroads of I-15 and I-215, right along State Street, a tremendous amount of economic opportunity, draws in large businesses, and is a great incubator for small and family-owned businesses, and a wonderful place for a strong and thriving chamber. That's what we're trying to make happen. So a lot has changed over the last few years. We've got an almost entirely new look board of directors, about 50% new members from vibrant new businesses and organizations. A lot of small businesses, large businesses like Comcast, and all the way in between. We've really refreshed our ambassador program. For some reason nothing's popping up here. 2 years ago, we had 4 ambassadors, and now we've got 13. I was at a meeting 2 weeks ago. We have 13 ambassadors. These are the folks who go out to the businesses themselves, engage with them, make sure that they're all participating in the community. So our 13 ambassadors are hard at work building the chamber, adding new members, and creating a lot of new energy, new conversation, increasing attendance at events, all those kinds of things. We've also launched a number of increased community engagement activities. We're engaging with local developers. It's a critical issue for commerce in our communities. It's a critical issue for the citizens who live here in Murray and Midvale, to make sure that we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening, who's building what they're thinking, and that we've got a wide open line of communication. So we're well on our way to building strong relationships with developers and creating a better and wider open line of communication there. Also hosting major events. Obviously with COVID, a lot has changed and we had to pare a lot of things back, but this year we're looking forward to our golf tournament again, which we do for charity every year. We partnered with the Murray Food Bank, and we do a ton of food drives, helping keep people fed. We are doing, of course, as Brian is aware, he was a member on this task force for a while. We're doing the Murray Area Economic Recovery Task Force, bringing attention to Murray businesses and trying to make sure that people shop local, stay local. That's been on a little bit of a hiatus over the winter with high case numbers, but we're looking forward to launching that again as we approach sort of vaccine time and people really being able to get out there and engage in commerce and feel safe again. And we're also doing a new community champion event. We've got a number of businesses who are interested in joining us as community champions. I'm proud to say Comcast was the first community champion for the Murray Chamber of Commerce, sponsoring about a dozen members who aren't able to cover their own membership due to COVID-19 and their declining revenues. Larger companies who have done well are stepping up to help support the community, support the economy, and make sure that smaller businesses are able to get connected and engage in the way that they need to really bounce back when the opportunity comes. And then, of course, we've got a new president. I was hoping to introduce you today. His name is Skylar Galt. Stephanie was our prior president CEO. She had been our president CEO for a few years. She stepped down during the early part of the pandemic. We performed a search and realized that the very best president was somebody on our board already. He's a real salesman by nature. And we've retained him because of his ability to grow the chamber, add new members, and understand what adds value. So what we're proposing today is just an early sort of lower level test entry into a permanent and we hope ongoing municipal partnership with Midvale City. It's an $8,000 membership. We'll call you a partner city. We'll of course place your logo, give you a verbal thank you at major events at the golf tournament, at the inauguration gala that we're going to do next year, at the community champion event that we're going to do later this year. We'll be talking about Midvale at those events. I will personally appear 4 times a year at your city council meetings. I'll give you a quarterly economic development update, let you know how things are going, what the perspective is of our local businesses. Engage with Midvale for Eggs and Issues and other recurring events. Eggs and Issues is something that happens every Friday. Typically, we've introduced and entertained Murray City officials. So it might be a mayor, might be a candidate for office. A lot of times, though, it's your public works director or your parks and rec manager, and they'll talk about the way that they're handling their issues and what challenges they're facing, and interact with the business community and make sure that they've got a good relationship there. We have our annual golf tournament. This will include a foursome and special recognition at the luncheon. That's right now planned for August, although that could move with COVID being what it is. The inauguration party, this is a new event that I'm really excited about. We're going to be hosting an inauguration party next, probably March, after everybody's been reelected and people have been sworn in, and are going to bring in a number of the most influential businesses in the community. Pretty exclusive event, but also invite, of course, our elected officials and give everybody a chance to get to know each other on a personal level, build those relationships that can help make a government and an economic community stronger. And then an invitation to that community champion gala. We're looking at hosting that. I think it's probably going to be about November. We're going to have our community champions there who we're going to be honoring. And we'd love to have the Midvale City officials as well as staff in attendance at that to go along with our Murray City officials we expect to have in attendance. And that's it. I wanted to keep it nice and short. You're smart folks. You can figure the rest out. Leave plenty of time for conversation. So if you have any questions for me, now's a great chance to ask them.
Thank you, Joe. Do we have questions for Joe about Chambers of Commerce?
I have a few, surprisingly, right? I'm going to talk for a minute. No one saw that coming. Joe, thanks for coming. I do want to say thank you for your vote of confidence on the, re-election. You threw that in there that we'll all be re-elected. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But the big question I have for something like this is, that's not an insignificant amount of money for the city. And, would it be branded still as just the Murray area? How would I wouldn't want to necessarily just be bankrolling Murray City commerce, do you foresee a lot of work in Midvale? I mean, we're neighbor cities, so obviously there's crossover. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's definitely an opportunity to expand our efforts in Midvale. We do have Midvale city businesses on our in our ambassador groups, on our committees, and we love Midvale. A lot of time is spent focusing on supporting Midvale businesses and strengthening those relationships. But I do think there's an opportunity there to build, I think, in particular, relationships with the sort of big enterprise businesses that in a lot of ways drive development at Midvale. I'm thinking of a lot of Bingham Junction and where your office used to be, Brian, up at the it's escaping me.
Up in the Fort Union area.
Yeah, the Fort Union area. I think that those businesses could be a big part of the chamber. I think that that's something that we're looking to build. We're already deeply ingrained in the small business community in Midvale. That's a big part of what we do. And in terms of the branding, I think that that's something that we can look at. We see this as sort of an entry level testing partnership for you guys. I know that it's been a while and we're trying to bring you back into the fold. And so this seems like a good way to test it out and to give you guys some proof points for the kind of value that we can provide and the kind of connection that we can provide to the business community. And then when we're talking about a more full level of financial support, I think that's when we'd be talking about changing the sort of title sponsorship nature that Murray's current support level gives them.
How much is that full level you're talking about?
So Murray currently pays it's $22,500 a year. So $22,500 is the ongoing support that we receive from Murray City. I would love for Mid-Vale to be at that same level. I think that, calling ourselves the Mid-Valley Chamber or the Central Valley Chamber or something along those lines is something I can personally see happening in the future. And it's a little bit of a end of the rainbow project for me, or end of the rainbow objective, I should say, for me. But that's the current level that we're at, and I'd love to have multiple cities supporting us at equivalent levels.
And what do you charge for the individual small businesses?
A small business is a $600 annual fee. That comes with a lot of the perks, a lot of invitations to events, although there's still sponsorship costs, particularly for the major events, sponsorship costs associated, or tickets for the golf event or other events like that. And as I said, we have our community champions that we're working hard to try and keep those costs down. So businesses are sponsoring local small businesses to be able to participate in the chamber, participate in the economy when they're not quite ready to make the $600 commitment just yet. And for our nonprofit community members, we have either a more affordable, lower cost option or a free option if it comes along with attending committees and helping with various events and volunteering. That creates a free membership option for our nonprofit partners.
Any other questions for Joe?
Yeah, Joe, this is Quinn Sperry. So with what you're trying to do with the Murray Chamber in getting us to join, are you looking to grow it kind of like how the South Valley Chamber is? I know you said this could be more of the Mid Valley Chamber. Is that the long-term vision?
I want to let the long-term vision be guided by the board as a whole. For me, I think the South Valley Chamber is a wonderful example of the way a local chamber can really help small businesses to thrive and really focus on that part of the economy. I think that that Murray and Midvale and this area is in a unique position because in addition to having small businesses and thriving commerce, we also have a high density of the major and multinational or national corporations that I think are have the ability to be huge contributors to the community. And building those relationships is another core goal of mine so that we can have all of the impact of having these big businesses right in our backyard, like CHG Healthcare and Overstock and Zag and MasterCard now. I mean, there's a lot of big businesses that I think want to be part of this community and just need to find a way in. So we'll see where it goes, council member, in terms of what it looks like. But I certainly think that's a great model for any chamber to pursue. Greg was very successful at building that chamber, and I think a lot of what he's done is things that we can borrow from and use to build our own model.
Hi, Joe. It's Councilmember Robinson. I just have one quick question for you. Outside of the fiscal responsibilities, what's the benefit of us pairing with Murray versus doing our own?
I think that you'll find that for one, as you mentioned, it's considerably more affordable to partner with somebody else and for everybody to be working together. But what I've found with chambers and with government investment in the economy is the more that you collect your resources, the more effective they are. The bigger impact gets made as we aggregate everything together and all start working together. I think particularly in the case of these communities here in the middle of the valley, we have a lot of the same interests. We have a lot of the same challenges that we're facing, a lot of the same objectives, and it makes a lot of sense for us to be in the same boat rowing in the same direction.
Thank you.
Joe, I have a question maybe for you or maybe even for one of our own economic folks in the city. Do you know any of our businesses? I mean, obviously we'd be focused on small businesses and big businesses alike. In fact, it's probably the smaller businesses who have the bigger impact and benefit from a chamber. But do you know, are there existing businesses like Topgolf or CHG that belong to different chambers of commerce like South Valley, or I guess that really would be the only one?
I'm not aware, Councilor, I'm not aware of any high profile members. I can't rule it out. I don't have access to the lists of other chambers. I know that the South Valley Chamber has done events at Topgolf before, so they may be a member. In my experience, most of those organizations are. Comcast is a great example. You know, we're a member of 23 different chambers across the state of Utah at varying levels of support, and I would like to see those businesses which may be members of other chambers in Midvale adopt the same approach with regard to the Murray Area Chamber.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Joe.
Certainly,
We
Mr. Mayor.
appreciate your oversight, your perspective, and the invitation to link our businesses into the Murray Chamber. As a supporting member, we would probably gain some benefits from that. Matt, did you want to close up with anything at the end?
I was just going to finish that up with, this will be one of the things that we will discuss as we go further into the budget process, and we can have further discussion if we either amongst ourselves or if we needed to ask anything else of Joe, just to make sure we have the right information before we make our decisions for next year's budget. So that's all I had to say on that.
Wonderful. I'd welcome any further conversation anybody wants to have.
Thank you very much. And we'll probably see you again.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council and Matt for setting this up. Appreciate it. You guys have a good
Thanks,
evening.
Joe.
Thank
See ya.
you. All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, so I want to call the Midvale City Council meeting on this second day of March to order. And this meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by House Bill 5002. I, Mayor Robert Hale, as chair of the Midvale City Council, hereby make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. As restrictions take place across the state for limiting public gatherings, the city wants to make sure everyone interested in participating in city council meetings can do so. This meeting has a YouTube link, and if you would like to provide public comments, please email your comments to Laura Magnus at lmagnes@midvale.com. prior to the completion of the public comments portion of the meeting. You may also submit comments if the mayor and city council open a specific agenda item to public comment. These comments will be read aloud in the meeting and will be part of the public record. So previous to our meeting, we've had a workshop in which we've discussed the legislature and in its final week, several have impacted Midvale, several are still hanging out there. We've also discussed our 2021 budget. And we've also had a discussion with Joe Silverzig of the Murray Chamber of Commerce, discussing the possibility of a chamber to be included in Midvale's businesses. So I want to welcome everybody, and we'll begin first now with a pledge of allegiance. If Chief Thomas, would you unfurl your flag? And let's all stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Rory, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, council members Robinson,
Here.
Gettle,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Sperry,
Here.
and Glover.
Here.
All right, very good. Next thing on our business is a report from our Unified Police Chief, followed by a report from our Unified Fire Chief. So Chief Thomas, would you lead out, and we'll have Chief Larson follow you.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I did get out our good landlord stats early this afternoon. That's the monthly report where we provide each one of our large high density housing complexes a copy of the police activity that's been in their area. I do not have the February stats as of yet. It's being the second day of the month. It's generally 7 to 10 days before we get those stats set to where I can send out an accurate report. So prior to the next meeting, I anticipate I will forward that to the council. Like this, we did fill our school resource officer opening up at Hillcrest High School with Daryl Broadhead. Right now is an interesting time within Unified Police because any openings that are open within any of the precincts are not typically filled as quickly in anticipation of the Taylorsville departure. So we're being very careful with new hire, rehire, et cetera. So even with some fairly new lateral hires that just got allocated to patrol, I kind of had to do some trading with some other. We had one of our officers that wanted to go up to the Mill Creek area. He just made the SWAT team, and this as a SWAT allocation, I can't absorb any more of those allocations in my patrol area. It's just too much burden upon the precinct to have that many SWAT operators. It's a great resource. It's a great asset, but to be fair across all the precincts, we need to allocate that. So prior to this officer trying out for SWAT, when he intended to ask for approval, I did let him know prior to that if he made the team, he would have to basically shop for another precinct. So we did lose Officer Sakino up to Mill Creek. There was an officer in Mill Creek that requested to transfer out to Kearns, and our school resource officer, Daryl Broadhead, was taken from Kearns. So it's a good trade all around. I wish I could keep every one of our SWAT operators here because they're high level of experience, training, and expertise. But unfortunately, that's not fair for our precinct. I'd like to mention also that we've been very proactive down along the corridor, and in the last week, we've closed 3 different hotel rooms due to meth contamination. That's what the health department requires testing as well as a remediation where they go back in and if required, the health department sets the level of decontamination that has to happen in these places before they're open. So currently at these hotels, you'll see pink tags on the doors advertising their closures. The UPD Budget and Finance Committee is coming up next Tuesday, 9 a.m. I believe on that, if I'm correct. And they'll be discussing budget as well as the proposed market increase for our patrol and our sworn and civilian officers. My last comment today will be a watch command log that hit me very early this morning, but I forwarded to all of council, which is fairly unusual. I generally just will filter these through the mayor as well as the city manager. But if you watch the late news last night, there was a dog that was intentionally set on fire out by Saltaire, and that's where our Magna precinct patrols. The dog is to my understanding, the dog's going to recover, but through follow-up on this and through cooperation with not only a witness that gave us a partial plate, we were able to investigate and found the suspect lived out in Tooele. And I won't go into a lot of details, but we did write a warrant on his house, and we're actually waiting for our SWAT team to respond. When the suspect came out of the house, we tried to do a felony stop on his vehicle. He chose to run. And I'm proud to say that Anna Walker, who is one of our SWAT operators, I was told did about 100-yard dash across the field and basically introduced him to what a well-trained fast SWAT operator can do on a run, and took him down and took him into custody. So if you haven't heard, the perpetrator in this event is in custody, and we know the facts of the event. But this is one of those things where this guy, we see some horrific things, but a lot of pieces came together in quick fashion last night, and boundaries didn't matter. We followed it out to Tooele and took care of it with the assistance of Tooele Police Department also. So those are my comments for this evening. I'll open it up to if council has any questions or concerns.
Chief, this is Councilmember Brown. Was it the same hotel?
Well, we have multiple hotels, but yes, all 3 rooms in the same hotel.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So I'm not convinced, this isn't necessarily for you, this is just generally, that we can't, like, when can we move in to shut down a hotel that has multiple rooms that have meth contamination? Like, is it in the same area that we have all of our other problems as well?
Yeah, it's a fairly consistent. I'll tell you that during my 2 of the 3, and I see Lisa's going to probably chime in on this, but 2 of the 3, well, actually, I was at all 3 of these occurrences. And I question those in custody, and they're very forthcoming with, they're not trying to hide anything because it's hard to hide, but the reason the draw there is it's cash, it's no deposit required, and it's very, very low priced. And that's what draws them there.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a public health crisis that we have there. And for us to do nothing at this point almost seems negligent.
I'll chime in just to say that I've been talking about it for 2 or 3 years now. The meth contamination is kind of the least of the worries of some of the other actions that have occurred over there. But my question, Chief, is, when there's a meth contamination of, a 5-bedroom home, the whole home is closed down, not just the rooms where it was found. So, that's, if you're finding 3 contaminated rooms in the same hotel, I kind of agree with Councilmember Brown that, it's not like the drugs were probably not confined to just those 3 rooms. It was probably shared among multiple people in multiple rooms is the more likely scenario.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Obviously, there's a physical makeup of the hotels where they've got exterior halls and no adjoining rooms, and then the HVAC, whether it's connected, and oftentimes that's where the contamination can travel, and that's really up to the health department to determine the level and how far they want to shut it down. So once we find the circumstances involved and we contact them, they secure it, they determine how much they do secure it. I will say that Lieutenant Malone has been working on a proposed nuisance ordinance, and I think he's working very closely with Lisa. I don't know if she has the latest copy. I saw a copy about 3 weeks ago and made some edits to it or suggestions. But I think I agree with you. It'd be really great if we had some more teeth, because right now it takes up a lot of time and effort, and we're stumbling across it. We're so proactive that, it's taken up a lot of time. I'd love to have more officers or our directed enforcement unit to go after this, but this is just stuff that's easy to find.
And I would think, I'm just going to add to that, if you're a legitimate business owner and 3 of your rooms have police, red tape, Department of Health, red tape, do not enter, drug contamination, whatever verbiage is put on those warnings, at some point you have to think about what kind of business you're running and how great of a job you yourself, the business owner, are doing at, running a business that, you can be proud of and your community can be proud of, because I don't think that that's happening in that corridor at all.
I don't argue that. Lisa, did you have anything to? Okay, thank you. Anything else, Council?
Can I maybe just chime in one thing there on that item too, or a couple things on that is, additionally, and usually at, I think the notice of the chief or someone else, Jerry has also been identifying code violations that are at some of these facilities in order to try to make sure that not only internally but externally they're complying with our ordinances. We have looked at it in the past and have had some challenges with looking at ways that we can apply additional fees or things for businesses that require a significantly higher level of services. And when we do that, one of the problems or challenges is that we need to be sort of equitable in how we apply those requirements. And so the challenge we can talk about further at another time is just there are other businesses that could potentially be affected by changes that affect those kind of fees. And there's been, in the past, there's been some concern that we wouldn't want to bring those into, wouldn't want to affect them by coming up with this additional fee structure. And that has been part of our challenge on how to address these concerns.
Could you not start with, could you not just start with meth contamination? Because if if that brings other businesses into, if McDonald's gets caught up with meth contamination, I'm totally fine with levying fines or additional fees on businesses like that. You know, I don't have any sympathy for anyone who would get caught up in that type of fee.
It's interesting to me, like if I were to build a carport outside of compliance by a foot, like the city can put like a non-conforming lien on my property, make it next to impossible to refinance or sell or even get fines, you know, and that would be detrimental to a homeowner. But apparently just losing 3 doors to a motel because the health department, but no repercussions from the city, seems like really inequitable between like the penalties we put on our citizens versus our businesses. Like we need to find a way to treat our businesses with the same sort of force to show that, you know, we want a good community here.
But also with the residences as well. I think if we're talking about meth as well, we need to be talking about the residences that have meth problems, because I don't think we've really addressed that either.
And I was just, I agree that, I mean, this is a big problem and that we need to find a solution for it. I would say though that to the point of that, the issue you were talking about, the carport or whatever, is that we do address violations of our ordinance and our zoning that those hotels have in a similar way to if the carport's not quite right, or if there's other not just code enforcement, but building issues, we address those as well in the same way that, I mean, the problem we're running into is we don't close down an entire apartment building if there's a few units that have meth. It's a problem. We want to address it. And I agree that we want it to be equitable across the different use types. It seems like it should be easier than it is. And it's just, there are some challenges. And again, a part of it, I mean, you make a good point. Can we do something that addresses the meth element of it as opposed to the number of police calls, which is how we were really looking at it before, which is where some of the challenges. So that's probably a different avenue that we can pursue it, but we have been looking at what those options are and been trying to research ways that we can address problems with businesses that are requiring a significant amount of public safety resources.
Sounds like Chief hit an unexpected nerve here with this topic.
Well, I don't know if you're talking about us or with them, but the
anticipated
Chief has
the
been
nerve.
doing the most work on this, and we really appreciate everything he and his crew are doing over there to help us out with this problem.
And to me, just, you know, that part is the police part of it. It seems to me that the code violation is the meth contamination, and we could very easily incorporate that into our enforcement aspect of it. You know, obviously Chief does the criminal. It's like Law and Order. They're two, the beginning of Law and Order. Someone help me out here.
Equal and something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's worth pointing out that we have had a very successful good landlord program with apartment owners. And it seems to have severely reduced the number of incidents and the height and depth of the dangers that we face in our apartments, thanks to our police and thanks to our code enforcement and the fees that the nonconformists have to pay. It only takes them about 1 year of doing that, and they figure out it's more profitable keeping a high standard in their apartments. So I think that we're on a track to establish the same process for our hoteliers and those that are non-conforming. They'll have a higher fee to pay to stay in business, and that's one way to catch their attention. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Chief Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, council members, city staff. It's always good to be with you. If you have a hard time hearing me or I cut out, please let me know. I just real quickly like to talk about 4 real quick updates, actually. COVID-19, we've vaccinated the majority of our employees, and the acceptance rate is staying around 90%. All COVID-19 protocols and safety measures are going to remain in place for the time being. We had a long discussion about that our last command staff. And with recommendations of the CDC and the health department, we've determined that it's best to do that for the short time, even though there's a downtrend. We're carefully evaluating how to re-engage more with our communities as the year progresses. Really hoping that things get back to somewhat normal so that we can jump back in and get involved with our communities like we had before. But still balancing safety measures to prevent the spread of COVID as we move forward with that. The budget process, Chief Peterson has met with all the division chiefs to present their budget proposals to him. The chief's not going to consider those and then prepare his budget to present to the UFA Finance Committee in April. And tentative board approval will be sought in May. Everyone's working really hard on that to provide the best service with the least cost to our communities. Recruit Camp 54 is in week 5, I believe now, of week 16. As of today, we have 33 recruits still in the camp, and they're learning a lot of the basics like fire behavior, how to use their personal protective equipment, ladders, ropes, knots, how to manage their self-contained breathing apparatus or SCBA. It's very critical, especially learning how to operate those under stress. They're learning how to effectively ventilate and use appropriate tactics under fire conditions. I would encourage you to go to our UFA YouTube channel. They give regular updates as the crews go through this. That's really interesting to watch. We've had a lot of hits on it. It's in the thousands, so it's kind of fun to watch, see what they go through. As was mentioned early in the workshop, the legislative sessions in full gear this last week. We've been monitoring several bills and supporting some that are related to behavioral health and wellness of the first responders. There are also several bills that may impact fire prevention, wildland fire, and EMS provisions. We're working really close with our lobbyists, the state chiefs and the Utah Association of Special Districts and other special interest groups to ensure that the concerns and or support are being heard. It's been a different year with COVID and listening to everything online and trying to participate and develop relationships. It's been a real challenge. I'm hoping that things will get back to normal so that we can work a little harder on that next year. I just have one incident I wanted to share with you. Captain Millard at your station 126A shift, A platoon, shared something with me. He's a new captain that's bid into station 126, doing a really good job there. And if you'll permit me, I'm just going to read his narrative because I don't want to miss any details. You know, fire and medical calls are generally what you hear about, and there are other calls that we go on that are often less heard about. And I thought this would be good to share. He said he just wanted to make us aware of an incident they had on the 26th of February. Engine 126 was dispatched at 3:30 a.m. to a flooding problem at the Department of Workforce Services building at 7292 South State Street. Upon their arrival, UPD was on the scene. He said he believes while patrolling, UPD noticed that the parking lot was filling up with water and then called for UFA to respond. They gained access to the building through the business Knox box that had the proper keys inside. We don't always find that, but that was a good thing, helped them get in quickly. With the help of Mid-Bell UPD officers, they were able to figure out that the sprinkler riser pipe in the business had broken just below the floor. In the riser room, there was about 3 feet of water. The riser room is a separate room that has the piping that comes in for the sprinkler system from the street. And there was about 4 inches of water throughout the business. They called for Mid-Bell City Water and RMP to respond as there was no valve easily accessible to shut down the water. UPD and UFA were able to get the power shut off to the building, eliminating the possibility of electrocution. They opened up all exterior doors and let the water run to the exterior of the building. He gives a big shout out to Duke with Midvale City Streets Department. He was the first representative to arrive. He was very helpful throughout the incident and should be commended for his hard work and dedication to getting the problem resolved. Battalion 13, Chief Ascardi was on scene, assisted with making decisions as the water was still rising in the parking lot and getting close to running over the curb and into more businesses and residents. They called for Heavy Rescue 117 to come with their water pump. During this time, there were several Midvale City and state representatives that arrived on scene. Everyone worked collaboratively together to get the problem resolved. It took several hours to deliver the pump supplies back to UFA after their use was no longer needed. He just wanted to make everyone aware of the unfortunate incident that occurred, but without the collaboration between UFA, UPD, and Midvale City, state officials, and other personnel, this incident could have been much worse. I just thought that was an interesting story behind the runs to share with you. That concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Well, we sure do appreciate UFA and fighting fires and sucking up extra water, turning off sprinkler systems. You did a good job. Thanks to all of your teams at 125 and 126.
I'll pass that on to him. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, our next section of our agenda is public comments. So any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for public hearing on the agenda may now submit their comment via email to lmagness@midvale.com prior to the completion of this portion of the meeting. Items brought forward to the attention of the City Council will be turned over excuse me, to staff to provide a response outside of City Council meeting. Laura, do we have any public comments this evening? I think you do have some.
I do, Mayor. I have 3 public comments. The first one is from Wayne Sharp. Hello, Mayor and council members. Whether I supported Trump or not, I am opposed to Resolution 2021-R-22, unless you also pass a resolution for Senator Lee and those who voted to not convict Trump. Both sides voted for what they thought was the right thing to do. I see no need for Midvale to be getting involved in this issue. Sadly, but only a small handful of people even know what is on the city agenda most of the time. Otherwise, this resolution could cause a lot of problems for the city. Dustin Gettle represents my geographical district, but I do not agree with this resolution. And then I have another one from Darren. Rather than commending Romney for voting to impeach Trump, you need to condemn him. I am a member of the Republican Party and am opposed to what you are trying to do. And then we have one more from Carl. We should be recalling Rhino Romney instead of praising the wannabe Dem. And that is all the public comments I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
Okay, we will close the public hearing or public comment section now then, except this might be requested if you have comments on a specific item that is yet on the agenda. We'll now move to council reports and begin with Council Member Dustin Gettle, please.
The only thing I wanted to mention, I sent an email earlier, late last week, about I don't know how to phrase it during a meeting, but dog poop, we'll just call it that. I've had a lot of complaints in and around Bingham Junction in the new apartment areas that just a lot of the common ground areas are littered with the remnants of a dog being there. So I did take just a walk around some of the newer apartments, and it really is a pretty significant issue. in my opinion. So I did send that email, just wondering what it is we can do, especially the newer apartment complex that is right at the corner of Seguini Drive and 7th West. The Reserve is what it's called, for those who haven't been back there yet. There's just like any part of that community where there's grass, you couldn't even walk through. I don't even know how the dogs go there to do their business. There's no more grass. I mean, it's mostly dog remnants. And, that community by far is the worst that I've seen of the ones that I've walked through, to a point where it has to be some sort of city compliance issue. I understand that we're not going to have people standing out waiting to watch someone not pick up after the dog and throw handcuffs on them. However, I think that we should be able to enforce some sort of code on the properties themselves. It's up to the property owners to police, for lack of a better term, their own people who live there. But if they can't do it and won't do it and aren't doing it and are leaving, a mess for the community, then something has to be done, just as we would do for a property owner, anyone who owns a home and wouldn't clean up after their dog. Neighbors complain, code enforcement comes out and they say, hey, clean up your yard or you're going to get, this and this and this. I think we need to start doing that to some of these larger apartment communities. Do it to the smaller ones too, if they have compliance issues. But, amongst my group of friends who, live in different areas of Salt Lake County, it's almost becoming to the point where Midvale is like the laughing stock of like, hey, this is where people don't pick up after the dogs and everyone knows it. So I definitely don't want that to be, sort of a mainstream opinion about Midvale, is that, we're the home of large apartment communities that has a large dog issue. So hopefully we can get something put together. To me, it's a combination of it's a health issue because, dog droppings are not safe to be, especially in quantity, they carry and transmit diseases. But it's also just a quality of life issue. If we're going to be a walkable city, and, some of our newest apartment complexes where, you can actually walk and do something like walk to the Jordan River Trail, I don't necessarily want to see, 20 piles of dog poop on my way to the Jordan River Trail. So if we could expedite any sort of process that would crack down on some of these communities, I think that would be very well intentioned of us to do.
Oh, Councilman Gettle, I just, since you sent that email, we've been reaching out to different agencies to see what they can do, both the health department and then also animal services. And from what I've gathered, I had Kate do the research on that, and she was saying that at least from the animal services, that it's sort of, it does come back down to this enforcement issue. And I think they might have been talking more about sort of public areas, because they're saying about the only thing that a person could really do is get someone with photo evidence, leaving that mess. I hear what you're saying about looking at the apartments themselves for having private property that has those kinds of issues, and we'll continue to look into that. But enforcement, it continues to be one of the challenges. Also in that research, though, I do think that it is unfortunate that Midvale is getting any kind of rap with this being a particular issue, because from what we've gathered in our research is this has become a much more common issue. And we're not, from what I gather, across the county particularly. And that, one of the issues is we're not sure when we're talking to these people who have to deal with it across the county, is if we're dealing with something that is more people staying home with COVID and are being bad dog owners, or if we have more people who are home and observing that there are bad dog owners. But in either case, I agree with you in the situation. It seems to be widespread. It seems to be a challenge, and we will see what we can come back to you with as far as a policy that could help us deal with it, it will be a enforcement issue.
Am I incorrect in thinking that if a neighbor, say someone on Ivy called about their neighbor who hasn't cleaned up after their dog for several months, we would be able to do something about that pretty immediately, right? Or do we just not have a dog poop enforcement method right now at all? Whether it's a private apartment community or, a single family home, do we not have any enforcement mechanism?
I'm under the impression that we don't have a clear mechanism. Lisa,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I was looking at like littering, and the littering definition doesn't seem to include poo. We do have nuisance animal provisions in our code where we can deal with things including poo. But that
well, unfortunately, it's the nuisance dog owner. It's not the dog's fault that it has to use the facility.
But that's how we have it written. But that has provisions in it that's like you have to identify the nuisance, notice the nuisance, and then the nuisance has a time frame to sort of deal with it. And so that becomes challenging as well if you're dealing with an animal in the park or something like that. We will see what we can do to put more teeth into it. Lisa, am I missing anything?
No, you're spot on.
Matt,
I can look at that.
sorry, this is Glenn. It sounds like we've been duplicating some efforts a little bit because we've noticed a significant problem in the Bingham Junction Park and the Main City Park. I walked through the park a little bit, the Main City Park yesterday. And yeah, it's definitely a problem. I reached out to the parks manager just to make sure that she felt that we had adequate doggy pots there and resources for people to take care of it. And we are in agreement that yes, those resources are available. And the frustrating part is that they're rarely emptied. So we don't have to refill them probably as nearly as often as we should if people were using it. Short story long, I think there needs to be an aggressive public education campaign on this, just to make it, to get it out in the forefront as we research some of the other options.
Glenn Spot, I was talking with a community development director from another community who has a trail that they walk on and that they have this same problem. They've got all of the resources around the bags and everything that people should be able to easily use, and people just don't. So I agree with Glenn that if we're really going to enforce, I mean, that's going to be tough and we'll have to figure that out, but somehow it's education and I don't know, shaming or something. I recognize that it is a problem and it's widespread and it's difficult to deal with.
I will say for the reserve, which is again that new one on Seguini and 7th West. Oh, someone's dog. Was that a dog barking?
Yeah, she needs to be let in.
Okay. As long as you pick up after her. They don't seem to have dog bags like those little areas. Especially where you think they would be towards, where there's grass heading towards Seguini or 7th West. There's no, not that I could see anyway. There's no like really accessible stations for folks there to use. And, again, it shouldn't necessarily be, you're the dog owner, you should have dog poop bags yourself if your community doesn't provide them for you. It's not just okay. I'm one of these people. Unfortunately, I have a hard time not saying something to people. So, I saw someone doing this around the reserve, and I said something, like, oh, you're just going to leave it there, something like that. Don't do that. Don't be me. But she said they don't have bags for us here. To which I wanted to say, like, okay, that's fine. You knew that when you left your home with your dog this morning. So why didn't you bring your own poop bag? But yeah, so that's why I think Glenn is correct. I think a public education campaign would be great because, some people need the basics to know that it's not up to your apartment community to provide you a dog poop bag. It's you, the dog owner. You have a dog, go out and buy 1,000 dog poop bags for $7.84 on Amazon. That is a true number. That's how much I pay for mine. Anyway, sorry I went so long, but it is an issue that I think it is unfair, as you were saying, Matt. I don't think it's just Midvale. People come to Midvale because they know that you can not clean up after your dog. I think it's just a product of we have large apartment communities being built, and that's where you're more likely to find a large scale problem like this.
One other quick thing to add, I was made aware that County Animal Services was at the main city park enforcing leash laws. So maybe if we could get them out there a little bit more often, we can work on that, and maybe just their presence will get people to pick up their poo.
Yeah.
Never heard poo so many times in a council meeting before. Wanted to say it many times, but
we set a record. Justin, thanks. All right, we'll move now to Councilmember Quinn Sperry.
Well, after that discussion, I want to say that it's getting kind of nice to be done with a pretty crappy legislative session. You see how I tied that into Dustin Gettles? There you go. Now, just it's nice to be done where they've had so many bills that are attacking the local authority of the city. I know we're not out of the woods yet, but a few more days, and then we'll have to be gearing up for next year to see what the legislature does. But you know, I think I'll agree with what Kane said earlier. The league, I think, has done a great job in taking the position that the cities have and talking to the legislators on our issues and really going to bat for us on a lot of the bills that were put forth. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bryant Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a second to mention that the news today broke that it's suspected that by May, they'll have enough vaccines for every adult in the United States. And, you know, as Spencer Cox said, he's hoping by the 4th of July that, you know, we can all set our masks on fire. I don't know if that's true or not, but the closest way to get to that is if every adult gets vaccinated, and they get vaccinated right when they are able to. You know, there's a lot of guidelines on when they can and cannot, and the best thing you could do for your neighbors and your community is to go as soon as you are able. So I would highly recommend everyone doing it as soon as possible. I want to get back to life as soon as possible. I want to get rid of these virtual meetings as soon as possible, and I think the quickest way is to get as close to that herd immunity number as possible. I was very encouraged with the thought of by the end of May, that could be an option. From a city standpoint, what's our goal? Is there a number when we finally say we come back or not? Does anyone know?
That would be a health department call, I believe, but
Is
we're leaning heavily on them to give us guidance. And I predicted even before the governor that we ought to have the 4th of July as our day of independence from the masks, and it sounds like he agrees with that as a good time frame. I hope it comes sooner than that, but we'll see. I think it depends on bed availability in the hospitals. It depends on the number of adults getting inoculated. It depends on those kind of health features that have been on the tip of our tongue now for over a year. And we just have to get serious about it, get it done so we can move on and have a different life than we've experienced since 1 year ago right now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Additionally, this might be a Matt question, but the Arts Council, we met last night and we're still sort of waiting for the invoice from last year's fiscal budget to get the grant. If you recall, I think 2 years ago, they got their grant twice in one fiscal year, and it caused a lot of problems for the Arts Council budget, and then it raised a lot of questions with like our auditor and stuff. So if there's any way we can get that to them as soon as possible so we don't run into that a second time, that would be great. We don't really know where to go from there. So
yeah, it's on me. I just need to get the grant agreement completed and sent over. That's what is the holdup. So
we know you're super busy, and because it's, we're pretty much closed, but we're planning for some things in the summer if things work out. But we're mostly worried about our own budget and the budget. Like, we don't want to cross over between the two like we had that one time.
Right. No, I will do my best to prioritize that this week.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Councilmember Heidi Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Gettle and I were lucky enough to do a tour last week of Momentum Glass Recycling. I'd like to thank Jason Utgard for his time on giving us the tour, and just tell everybody how truly excited I am to add this service to our Midvale residents. I think we learned a lot. I think the first thing I walked away with that you actually can recycle broken glass. I was always under the assumption that you couldn't, but he walked us through the process and they do break it. So he said that doesn't matter at all. It can still be sent in there. I had no idea how many uses it had. So yeah, just all in all, I was really excited about it and I found it very interesting, and I really can't wait to get it rolled out. And that's it. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Councilmember Paul Glover, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple things. I just wondered how we are doing on the swimming pool with the county. If we haven't heard anything for so long. And I know most of it's probably for COVID, but I wondered if the staff could give us an update, and doesn't have to be as soon as we can, but like to know what our plans are for that. And then the other thing that I'm kind of curious about is the census, how that came out, and we're still waiting on that, and how that might affect our elections this year or in the future. That's all I have.
It's my understanding that it will not affect our elections this year. We won't even have the data till after the election. So it will come into focus on the election following this one coming up.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I just have a couple of things here. I've met with the health department last week with a couple of other mayors to try to figure out a way to overcome some problems with the mass vaccination. And the biggest issues the statistics are pointing out is we're still in Midvale. We're not the worst, but we're far from the best in getting our 70 plus age group vaccinated. And also we're falling behind in our minority groups, getting those folks vaccinated. And so we talked about some ways that the county health department could increase the exposure of doing the right thing around this vaccination. And I suggested that they take full advantage of our senior center next door to City Hall and make that a vaccination point. And also the churches within Midvale. Also to contact the Mexican consulate and work with them in getting the word out to get vaccination and where our Mexican and Hispanic neighbors can get that taken care of. The CBC, the Community Building Community Health Clinic, and all of the health clinics. We've got several in our city. They could all pitch in and be made available to perform vaccinations, or at least question their clients, have you been vaccinated? And if not, here's a schedule, here's a phone number, here's a website where you can go get it done. And the last place that we talked about were for minorities are the ethnic markets within our city. We have one on Main Street. We have two on 7200 South, one east of State and one west of State. And there may be others that don't come to my mind right now. But if they were to raise the profile of the vaccinations in those locations, surely we would get the ethnic groups and senior citizens to a higher degree of vaccination. So they took those suggestions. Matt Dahl was with me on that call, and I think we're going to see an improvement there. I had a unique opportunity today to be at the Midvale Homeless Family Shelter, and Governor Cox and the road home management from their leader on down, and Pamela Atkinson were there. And as you may have noticed on our state income tax return, there is a box for donating to the Pamela Atkinson Homeless Shelter Fund. And we want to let you know that that was on all of the TV stations, his visit to the center, to the homeless family, the family shelter, excuse me. And I would encourage any of you that have not yet got that far down through the tax form, remember when you get to that point to check that box and make a donation, or simply make a donation to the Pamela Atkinson Homeless Fund. All of those donations go right toward our center, all of the centers, but we get a large portion of it with our children there. That's all I have. And so I'll ask Kane Loader to, if he has a report that he'd like to give to City Council.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I got a couple of things. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen.
You know you're going to get good at this and then it's over.
I know. So I just found this, and I'll follow up with Sully County Animal Services tomorrow. This is off Sully County Animal Services website. You can read that. I'll send it out to you. It's an email. But apparently they will help us with the dog poop problem. And what they're doing is encouraging people, if they see someone or know of someone that's not picking up after their dogs, to either take a picture or in some way identify the person, and they will write them a citation. So there you have it. I think we have help on the way. So I'll call them tomorrow and follow up with that, and I'll send this off to all of you. But this is directly off the Sully County Animal Services website. Any questions?
I think we're all pooped out tonight.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about, Councilmember Robinson, have you been seeing the correspondence going back and forth on the complaints on the Mid-Valley Elementary School?
I have. Thank you so much for roping me in on that.
You're welcome. Anytime. We're dealing with some of those complaints with the health department, or health department, the Mid-Valley Elementary School. There's some complaints from a resident there, as you're well aware of. I think you've been included on that. Some, if not all, the council. We're working with UPD. Had a couple of conversations with the district today. They'll be following up. I'm not sure. Apparently, one of the complaints is the deliveries, early morning deliveries. Apparently, that's their milk delivery that comes in early in the morning, and they're going to see what they can do about that. But I'm not sure that violates the noise ordinance, because I know Winder Dairy's been delivering milk for a long time without anybody complaining about them delivering that early in the morning. but we'll follow up on that and see what we can do to resolve that problem with the school, and they're working with us. Matt, have you got anything that you want to report tonight?
Kate, can I jump in real fast on that last topic?
Yes.
Can we get them to at least this school board to at least fix the paint, the painting lanes? They made like a really crappy turn lane in the middle, and it's the only place on that road that sort of has one. So, but they didn't really erase the old shoulder line. So if you're driving down that road, you're straddling a shoulder lane, or you're driving in this new turn lane they created. I mean, the best they could do at least is make a better product than what they did. I don't know why we accept such shoddy work, but if we could put pressure on them to fix that, I think that would be good. It wouldn't alleviate a lot of the problems, but at least make it look like they tried.
Okay. Glenn, will you take a look at that one?
Yeah, between Keith and I and Steve, yeah, we'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It literally looks like you have double vision when you're driving down that way.
It's terrible.
You don't know, like, oh, am I supposed to go right or left?
We'll look into that one, see if we can get that one fixed. The gate issue was another one that was the complaint, but that one's more of our problem, because it's if they're allowing people, well, there's two things. They've got to be able to have fire access to that all the way around that building for fire trucks, and they have to leave the gate open. I know the neighbor would like to see them close the gate and lock it. And then if they're allowing those athletic fields to be used off hours, we need to be able to get ambulances and paramedics in there, police officers in case of an emergency. So I talked to Leon Wilcox, who's over all the facilities for the school district, and they don't typically lock any, or they don't lock any of their schools up because of they're used by other groups after hours. So that's probably one thing that we can't require them to do, is lock that gate. Matt, do you have anything else?
I think we've covered in one way, shape, or another the stuff I would have talked about already. So no, I don't.
I thought you had in addition to dog group, but if you don't, then we're good. Okay, Laura, have you got anything tonight?
Thank you for asking, Kane. The only thing I have is the presentation I'm doing later, so I don't need anything right now. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, that concludes City Manager's report. Thanks.
And thank you, Kane. We'll now have a department report from Public Works. So Glenn, you've got your voice box all warmed up. Why don't you take for a few minutes and show us what you got?
Sorry, I clicked a button. I got 3 screens going and they kind of all switched and I got lost. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Parks and Sanitation, working on electrical issues and replacing light bulbs on the Jordan River Trail. We've got like 166 lights back there, I believe. There's some wiring issues. We're not sure if maybe the wire was stolen, but we're looking into that and trying to get them working as quickly as we can. Also some gopher issues in Bingham Junction Park and the cemetery. Working with some pest control contractor on that currently. Some normal maintenance in the parks. Horseshoe pits were reworked and leveled. Trimmed some trees along Bingham Junction that were impeding some sidewalk access. And then we're working on updating and increasing signage pertaining to overnight parking and camping in the parks. We're coming up with some issues where development is encroaching, right up next to the park, and people are kind of using that as their overflow parking. So that's the reason for that. As far as sanitation goes, shout out to Laura. She's been really throwing out a lot of information on the bulky waste that's coming up next month. She can probably give you a better list of everywhere that it she's placed it, but this is off the city website. So if you want to spread the word, the information is there. Fleet and facilities, some minor UPD boiler repairs, not related to last year's overall replacement. Routine maintenance on the water heater at City Hall, and they're completing filter replacements in all of the other buildings. City Hall was completed a couple weeks ago. Fleet, general repair and maintenance, and then assisting the plow crews. We did get to go out and use that equipment and spread some salt, which I'll get to a little bit later. And then I'll say all three. So there's one person in fleet and one person in facilities, and then Levi, the manager. They've all been spending a good amount of time trying to help organize the museum and get things going there. Streets and storm, we had a little bit of a software issue on the radar feedback signs. I think we've got it figured out. We may have lost a couple months of data, but I think that we're good to move forward there. And we've gotten a few storms since last council report. The most significant was on the 16th and 17th of February. And I was really, really pleased and proud of the guys. They cleaned that up really quickly. Like by 2 in the afternoon, the streets were cleared. Total of 273 tons of salt and 161 labor hours. That's not just for that storm, but all the storms combined since then till now. Hopefully you are seeing good results out there. Water sewer. This one, I was really excited to show you this report. And then I found an error, but we'll go through it like it didn't have an error. So the trust gathers up information from all of their member agencies on how each of their sewer departments are performing. They give you some parameters here and some benchmarks. And we were looking really good. I thought this was just a 1-year data set, but it's actually a 4-year data set. And I knew that we had a claim during that time. So I called them back, and it's the next slide will show that information. But let's assume this is a 1-year report. We look really good. Miles of pipe, the average for the trust, we're a little over that, a little under on connections. The time that it takes us to get through our system and to clean it all, we're about 1.5 years, which is, quite a bit better than the others. And then when we get down here, this is kind of a thank you and to show you some results. Previous to 2 years ago, we did not have a SCADA system, and we did not have backup generators on those lift stations, which is huge. And I think that that's what led to the claim that we'll get to in a minute. But as you can see, Midvale's in a good spot now. Assuming this is the 1 year, 0 claims all the way down. Sewer department's been doing a great job staying on top of things. Now, this one included our lift station flood that happened in 2017, 2018. And that was a $125,000 claim. You can see the claim cost per mile of pipe compared to the other entities wasn't good. It was a very, very big claim. But this will save us moving forward. So I just thought it was an opportunity to show that we asked for some things, and you were gracious enough and good enough to give us the resources to get the generators, to get the SCADA, to add an additional sewer person, and the results are showing. So I thought that was just a good opportunity to relay that. Are there any questions or concerns for Public Works?
I'm really happy to see those report numbers, Glenn. that's a tremendous step forward in prevention
Yes,
for future problems, and job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks, Glenn, for all the work you guys did with the snowstorms. I think it was so warm today that a lot of us forgot that we had snow 10 days ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, the few issues that I had, and you guys were out immediately to remedy some of those. And I know the residents were very appreciative of your efforts.
Excellent. And Chief Larson, would you send that email pertaining to the workforce services? I'd like to share that with Duke, and then also Katie. Katie, this was her first on call, so it was a baptism by fire, but I got nothing but good reports on how she performed as well. So I'd just like to share that with the group, if you could send that over. I got a thumbs up. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate that good report. Okay, we arrive at the part of our meeting that is a public hearing. So I'd like a motion to move into a public hearing.
Mayor, I motion we move into a public hearing.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to begin our public hearings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay. Our first public hearing is to consider ordinance number 2021-004, rezoning 2100 acre of property located at 460 West Oak Street from single-family residential zone SF1 to single-family residential zone with public utility or facilities overlay SF1AO. Alex, would you explain what this is? I think we all remember the house that was located where this is going to be.
Well, this has actually been a water facility for quite a while. Let me share my screen. I can show you what we're working with here. So this is a request that came out of Glenn's office. So we'll just pull him right back in and let him talk some more in this meeting. But we've got a water station set up here on Oak Street that's been operating there for several decades. It's been about, 15 to 20 years ago, it got a small expansion, and I'm not sure how long it's been there before that, but it's been there for a long time. It's in the single family residential zone, which does allow major utilities like this as a conditional use permit, but it's subject to the same standards that every other development in the single family residential zone is subject to. So that includes things like setbacks and parking and landscaping and such. And when Glenn brought this property up, he indicated he's got a facility expansion project he needs to do that can't meet those ordinance requirements. So he and I spent some time chatting about what that means, and we eventually settled on this rezone as the best course of action to move forward. So the public facilities overlay is a zone that was set up specifically for municipal facilities and other governmental organizations to use in situations where the zoning ordinance doesn't really let the property be used in the nature and the fashion that it needs to be. So we've applied the public facilities overlay in a few places. It's on some of the school properties, as you can see here, just to the northeast of the site we're looking at. It used to be on City Hall before we rezoned it last year for the form-based code, and we've tacked it onto a few other places around the city. One of the nice things about that zone is it specifically exempts the property that has the zone from meeting whatever requirements the council deems necessary. So for this particular request, we're looking at waiving the setback requirements, the fence height requirements, and the conditional use permit requirements for this particular facility. You can see here on the site plan, there's a new building going up right next to the sidewalk as proposed. In order to approve this request, there are some findings that need to be made. The first one is, the first two actually are consistent for all rezones. The council needs to find that the rezone is consistent with the general plan, and In this particular case, that the rezone is necessary to provide land for a community need not anticipated originally in the general plan. And then for public facilities, there's a couple extra findings that need to be made. One is that there's a demonstrated need for the facility and that it's not contrary to the public interest. And then second, that this facility is located, planned, and developed in a manner that's not inconsistent with health, safety, and general welfare of persons in the city. We think at the staff level that all of these findings are easy to make. The general plan identifies this as a stability area that's going to stay as a residential neighborhood for the medium term. So it makes sense to provide facilities for water service in that neighborhood and for the whole city. That area will need water service, and so we need to provide opportunities for it to be handled in the area. So it makes sense to provide that overlay. And then there's obviously a need for water, and then this facility has been designed to minimize impacts on the neighbors. There aren't really any neighbors around since the I-15 project demolished all the houses on Oak Street to the west. And then we've got the school fields and other streets and open space to the south and to the east. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this last week, and we knew we had to move fast for Glenn's sake. So we scheduled them back to back. The Planning Commission made all of those findings and recommended the City Council approve the rezone. And so we're here tonight to ask the council to do so. So it's a pretty basic request. This is just a small building. Glenn can probably give you some more background about what's going to happen inside of it and what the need is. And we've prepared an ordinance that would adopt that rezone effective immediately so that he can get started on his project as soon as the council decides if it's appropriate. Any questions? No, Mayor, you're muted.
Glenn, did you have any input you'd like to make to the council?
Now it's going to be a chlorination facility. I'm going to assume that the expansion that Alex mentioned 10 or 15 years ago was probably for fluoride. But this is the chlorination facility that was brought to you a few months back, last budget cycle, actually. It's to maintain safe drinking water basically on the west side of the city, which is not currently chlorinated.
Okay.
There will be very little impact or change to any of the current operations. It will just be an additional small building there.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Laura, do you have any public comments on this item?
No, Mayor, I do not have any public comments on this item.
Okay. If there are no further questions, then I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to
Second.
close the public hearing and a second. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Yes.
Any opposed? Okay. Who would like to bring up an ordinance on this ordinance 2021-004?
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2021-004, rezoning property located at 460 West Oak Street from the single family residential zone SF1 to the single family residential zone with public facilities overlay SF1/PFO based on the following findings. 1, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the goals of the 2016 Midvale City General Plan. 2, the proposed rezoning is necessary to provide land for a community need that was not anticipated at the time of adoption of the general plan. 3, there is a large demonstrated need for the public facility within the community at large and is not contrary to the public interest. 4, the public facility is located, planned, and developed in such a manner that it is not inconsistent with the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the city.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Rory, would you ask the question, please?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, our next public hearing is to consider ordinance number 2021-005, adopting a zone ordinance text amendment to modify development standards for master plan development projects in the single family zone SF1, SF2. Again, Alex, would you like to give us the skinny on that?
Mayor, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
All right, let's do that first.
Move to
Mayor.
go to a public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor of opening this public hearing, would you say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, now Alex.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So this request is the first step in answering the question that the council raised last year about what to do with master plan developments. So last summer, there was some consternation about some projects that happened that used that master plan development standards. You may recall we had a moratorium adopted in July that temporarily prohibited multifamily residential project types in single family residential zones for master plan developments. And then Nate and I and Janet and Jason spent some time working with the council en masse and individually to try and come up with some solutions for how to address those concerns. That moratorium ended in January, and we wanted to make sure that we kept that standard in place as a permanent measure while we continued to work on these master plan development changes. So so far we've taken all of those comments we received from the council, and I've put together a first pass at what would be a new master plan development standard, but we still need to refine it, fine tune it, respond to the changes that the legislature is proposing this year, and make sure that we go through a good public process to ensure that those standards are what we want to see for those projects going forward. So this particular ordinance is limited in scope. This request would basically codify permanently that prohibition on multifamily residential projects in master plan developments until we go through that longer process to establish those better standards for them in the future. So it's pretty basic. It's literally just what we adopted as the moratorium in a permanent sense. We presented it to the Planning Commission last month. They didn't have any comments or concerns. We did have a good discussion about what master plan development should look like in the future. And I think the Planning Commission is on board with the council's vision for how those will look. And I anticipate in either the next meeting in March or a meeting in April that will bring a rough draft version of what those changes could look like for the council to discuss. And then once everybody's on board, we'll go back through that public hearing process to actually adopt new standards for those projects. So this will be a pretty basic change just to make sure that we fill in any gaps between the end of that moratorium and those standards that we adopt in the future. Any questions?
Alex, so essentially the only change I noticed was like we removed that one sentence, right?
Yes.
That's all?
Yep. So what that does is that prohibits all townhome or multifamily or basically any project that has more than 2 units in a single building in a master plan development in the SF1 and SF2 zones. So you won't see townhomes, you won't see apartments, you won't see threeplexes. You'll see detached and 2-unit buildings until new standards are adopted, hopefully later this year.
Okay, and we don't see any, and we are allowed to do that without any repercussions, right? Like we're not going to see a developer try to sue us or anything because it's a pretty strong stance.
No, I mean, we're allowed to write our own ordinance. These are single family residential zones. We don't have to allow multifamily developments in them. Okay. So there is a bill under consideration right now that will have impacts on master plan developments. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't actually put out a draft for adoption yet. So we can monitor and adjust as needed to respond to it.
So we don't do it twice.
Yeah, basically. And so that we don't become the poster child for why cities shouldn't be allowed to design ordinances for master plan developments or similar projects. So we want to make sure that we're factoring that in as we go through that process.
Other questions for Alex? Laura, did we have any public comments on this item?
No, Mayor, I have not received any public comments on this item.
Okay. Now I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing then.
I motion close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Yes.
Any opposed? All right, public hearing's closed. I'll entertain a motion on ordinance 2021-005.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2021-005, amending Title 17 of the Midvale City Municipal Code to modify development standards for master plan development projects in the single-family residential SF1 and SF2 zones.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, Rory, would you call the questions, please?
Yes, Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Aye.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is the consent agenda to consider the minutes of February 16, 2021.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any questions on the motion? Rory, would you call the question?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry.
Aye.
And Glover.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is an action item to consider resolution 2021-R22, a resolution commending Senator Mitt Romney for voting to convict former President Donald John Trump on impeachment charges that included inciting insurrection against the United States of America. Now, Dustin, this is yours, so why don't you help us out?
All right. Thanks, Mayor. As you recall, our last council meeting, I had brought up this idea just in an effort of multi-partisanship. We always say bipartisanship, but there are more than two parties here in Utah and beyond. So in the interest of multi-partisanship, I thought to veer from what we see happening in a lot of jurisdictions in the United States, and that's when someone takes a vote that's controversial, those who oppose that vote issue a resolution or a proclamation of condemnation for that particular vote. So we see it's often very negative kind of reinforcement. I don't like your vote, so I'm going to do this negative thing to you. So I thought because Mitt Romney does represent every single person who lives here in Midvale and in the state of Utah, that it would be nice to take it from the opposite approach. And whether we agree with, the facts surrounding the impeachment vote, I think based on the pared down version of the resolution that I sent out today, that strips kind of okay, I will admit that I was not right in the resolution that I offered 2 weeks ago. I don't think that was not the nonpartisan approach to take. That resolution was very partisan. And although I don't disagree with anything that was in that resolution, it's hard to make an argument that that was a nonpartisan resolution. So anyway, all of that said, I did I did send out to the amended resolution that we'll be hopefully voting yes on today or tonight. I did just want to give some background before I pull up. I'm going to share my screen. Of all the Zoom meetings that I've done in the past year of COVID, I've never shared my screen with anyone. So we'll see how that works. But anyway, I mentioned in our last meeting, Mitt Romney he's not, I voted for him once in the Republican primary in 2018 because I thought his opponent was a little bit out of the mainstream of what we would like to see here in Utah. But I voted against him in 2012. My mom, who's a resident of Massachusetts, I lobbied her to vote against him on more than one occasion when he was a politician in that jurisdiction. So I'm not doing this because Mitt Romney's any great friend of mine. I voted for Jenny Wilson in the general election in 2018, as did the city of Midvale as a whole. Jenny Wilson carried Midvale by 3 or 4 percentage points. But what's become very clear while Mitt Romney's been in office is that whether or not you agree with him, and I do have strong disagreements with him on several policies, several current policies that he's espousing. But one thing I think most of us will agree on is that you're not afraid that Mitt Romney's going to do, if not the right thing in your view, you know that he's going to do what he thinks is right and what he thinks is right for the state of Utah and for the nation as a whole. And I would be confident in saying that, the 5 of us council members and mayor, probably all of us have voted for Mitt Romney in one fashion or another at one point in time or another. And I think that's very telling of the kind of politician that he is. I'm not going to tip my cards and say, if I subscribe to any political affiliation, one or the other, probably doesn't take too much to figure out which way. But we are a nonpartisan board, so I did try to make the resolution a lot more nonpartisan. So let me see if I can figure out how to share this screen. Okay, so what do you guys see?
A red flashing dot. Now it's blank.
Okay. Now do you see anything?
I see Mitt Romney did a thing and
Okay.
some of us agree.
Okay. This is a joke. This is my pared down version of the resolution. Mitt Romney did a thing and some of us agree with what he did at the end. That's not the actual resolution. And I do, oh, here it is. So what I did with the resolution was remove any mention of Donald Trump, which kind of got people riled up one way or another, and just focused it on the events of what happened. The very telling thing for me, and the reason I wanted to do this, was just the images that they showed during the impeachment trial of Mitt Romney being ushered by Capitol security to safety. I mean, that's our United States senator, and he really was in danger. Whether it's, you shouldn't speculate to say what would have happened to him, but the very common sense tells you something not great would have happened to him if he would not have been whisked away to safety. And we'd be having a very different conversation right now as a political body if something would have happened to him. So I was very struck by those images of him being whisked away by Capitol Police, really just moments before the angry mob came his way. And also there were some scenes of him at the Salt Lake Airport, which are pretty disturbing to me. Just as a public official, I always remind us that we are public officials, we're politicians, we run for office. And just the folks that surrounded him while he was simply waiting for his plane at the airport was, pretty disturbing. I don't think any of us would like that to come to Midvale. Imagine going to Winco or Smith's and being surrounded by people, asking why you voted this way or that way, and not doing it in the most pleasant way either. Obviously, as public officials, we should expect some public scrutiny, but we also don't expect to be, hounded and harassed at airports or anything like that. So, some of those images really struck me, and I was thinking that, the very easy thing for Mitt Romney would have been to vote no on the conviction. If he would have voted no, anyone who was already hounding and harassing him about his prior impeachment vote and some of the ways that he's ducked his own party, those things would have gone away. It would have been very easy for him to vote no, and probably people would have celebrated him on the far right and said he did the right thing. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes courage for us sometimes just to vote yes or no on a large apartment complex that's coming into our district. So I can't even imagine the stress and just the courage that I hope that a lot of us as public officials would have when faced with something that we think is right or wrong. So that's what led me to this resolution. And that's why, whether or not you think this type of resolution is what the city should do, I think as public officials, as I said, it's very important for us to recognize, at the very least, when someone who represents us, he represents us, as a city, but he also represents each and every one of us individually as residents of Utah. It's very important to recognize that someone took a courageous vote like this, because in my opinion, history is going to be very kind to Mitt Romney, and that's going to be, the history it's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years, 100 years from now. History is going to be very kind for what Mitt Romney did in February of 2021. So anyway, the resolution, I do want to just read a little bit of it here. The resolution as amended, I cut out even the title, I cut out a lot of it. So the resolution title is a resolution commending Senator Mitt Romney for his impeachment vote. I think that's pretty that's the most nonpartisan way I could say that. So, it's recognizing the courageous nature of his impeachment vote, not necessarily that you as an individual council member would have voted to convict Donald Trump, but recognizing that in the face of a violent mob who probably would have done harm to him, he still voted what he thought was right for the state of Utah and for the country as a whole. So whereas on January 6, 2021, a violent insurrectionist mob reached and attacked the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., and whereas as a result of that attack on the Capitol, at least 5 individuals lost their lives and numerous others were left injured. And whereas Senator Romney was elected to the United States Senate in 2018, winning over 62.6% of the statewide vote in Utah. And whereas security footage from the January 6, 2021 shows Senator Mitt Romney being ushered to safety from the path of insurrectionists with precious seconds to spare. And whereas Senator Romney showed extraordinary courage in being one of only 7 Republican senators to vote to convict Donald Trump despite certain political fallout in Utah and nationwide backlash. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of Midvale, Utah, if we approve it, obviously. Section 1, Midvale City Council commends Senator Mitt Romney for his courage and leadership as Utah's junior senator during an extremely volatile political atmosphere where his own personal safety was compromised and without regard to his own political advancement or allegiances. And Section 2, the Midvale City Council finds that by engaging in the above cited actions, Senator Mitt Romney has admirably fulfilled his oath to do impartial justice according to the Constitution and laws as an impeachment juror, and has faithfully supported and defended the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So that's the pared down version of the resolution that will be before us here tonight. And I think I successfully unshared my screen. Any questions that I can answer? I know when I mentioned it 2 weeks ago, there was not any, Councilmember Brown chimed in and said that he was in agreement that we should do something like this. I didn't hear any reasons why we shouldn't move forward. I understand that there probably is some concern from at least one or maybe two council members, and let's discuss.
Dustin, just to be clear, I was in support of the original language, and as a, I don't. There's a lot of you might not agree with it or disagree with it, but calling it partisan is something that I don't understand because I don't know what party people are trying to tell me it's a part of. When you have a Republican senator voting for in the history of the United States, the most bipartisan conviction trial, like in the history, Andrew Johnson was a terrible human being and had a less bipartisan. So, I mean, we can talk about how we don't agree with doing it as a group or whatever, but I'm not in favor of saying that it was partisan before because by definition, we did not have that.
And I agree with you, Councilmember Brown. I wanted to try to appease as many people as possible. Talking to former Councilmember Wayne Sharp, who his comment was read into the public record tonight. He and I had a discussion about this, and I'm not going to say that he supports the pared down version of it, but I don't think that he's necessarily against it. Certainly not to the point that he was against the original one. So, I mean, I guess in a way, I used his thinking on it as, now as a not elected official, but as an elected official before who, has some insight into this process. I would say that he's probably more comfortable with what we're voting on tonight, but I don't want to speak for him. But what I want to say real quick is, I didn't want to point out, I didn't say, okay, I'm a Democrat. However, Mitt Romney is not. So, therefore, it is bipartisan in the fact that can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
You can. Okay. So as a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, and this is a commendation for a Republican in Utah, and a conservative Republican at that. And, we can talk about the public comments from before or not, but, it is bipartisan in the fact that, we don't have just Republicans on our city council. That would be, it's a very bipartisan thing that we're doing here. And that might be the reason why it doesn't get 5 votes also, but, I agree with you, and, in the attempt to appease as many people as possible, that's why I chose the different language for this resolution.
Okay, is there comments and discussion on this?
Yeah, Dustin, I appreciate your opinion. And I want you to know that I've been on the city council for 17 years and never once have I had to choose a resolution that didn't do with Midvale, basically the citizens or something to do with them. And this does in some way do that, but we're divided. This is going to divide our community. It doesn't bring us together. I could say, well, I want a resolution for Senator Lee. I think he was courageous too. I mean, it is bipartisan. At least that's the way it's viewed by many citizens. I've had several people talk to me and we're not happy with it. Obviously, they probably haven't seen your pared down, but the motive to me is probably what's the motive? You had to, your first attempt was, and then you had to bring it down to try to get everybody to agree with it. I just don't like the idea of Midvale City. We run as nonpartisan. We try to promote our citizens, and I think that the resolutions ought to be for our citizens, and not on a national scale or even a state scale. That's just my opinion. And I do appreciate your opinion. And any of us can write to Romney or Lee or any of them and tell us we're thankful for what they did. I'm starting to run out of battery here.
And Councilmember Glover, I appreciate your perspective as well. And I think that we as a council, are very respectful of the different opinions that each of us bring. And, in a small way, that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here with the resolution, is that we need more bipartisanship, even on a nonpartisan board. We can say that we're nonpartisan, but each and every one of us has taken, a partisan stance on an issue in the past, and we will again in the future. It's just the nature of kind of the things that we do. It's not, we don't view every issue in a lens of nonpartisanship.
No, you have your principles and I have my principles, but it doesn't have to be for a particular party or against a party, or, I support the president we have now, but it's the bottom line is that's my right. I don't have to tell other people that that's what they have to do. They vote for these people. And so through their vote, they're going to either the next vote, they'll tell Romney he did a great job or he didn't. That's their right.
I just think that as public officials, I think the main issue we have in American politics is that we don't give enough credit to the people who take these types of courageous stands. And that's why not as many people take courageous stands, because you actually get more media coverage when you take an unpopular stand. The people who say the worst things are the ones who get the most coverage. The people who say the nice things and have the courageous reasoning behind doing stuff, they don't get as much press. It's the people who condemn and criticize and censure that get the press. It's not the people who say, hey, good job. We might not agree with you, but we recognize that it took a lot of conviction on your part to do that. And that's where I think, it may not be an issue facing Midvale, but, Mitt Romney does represent every single person in the city of Midvale, and we are the public officials that they have chosen to represent their interests. And therefore us saying, good job, Senator Romney, we appreciate the fact that even in the face of you having to be whisked away by Capitol Security, you did what you thought was best for the state of Utah and the United States of America.
I just have a different point of view.
And I thought you might.
So,
discussion? Okay.
Yeah, my take on this is, as the elected officials of Midvale, we're supposed to be acting and looking at issues in the best interest of Midvale, our city. And I understand how you're saying Mitt Romney represents the people of Midvale, but ultimately I don't see this as a city issue. And what I do see it happen, us adopting a resolution like this, I just see it resulting in more divisiveness instead of trying to bring our community together. So that's the issue that I have. Even though you've pared it down, people are still going to look at it and say this is a partisan issue. And people have very strong opinions on both sides. I mean, we're seeing that in the media, just like how you're saying he's being, some people are applauding him, other people think he's a villain. And, same thing with Lee and however they voted. It's just it's a divisive topic and an issue that I don't think necessarily relates to the city. And so why are we adopting a resolution that is just going to create more division in our city? I don't see that it benefits us. That's my position.
And, I don't think that I have to rebut. I think your point is valid. And, obviously, I remember you've kind of been on the fence on some resolutions like this that we've done before that, maybe were more related to Midvale City, but, were state legislative issues that we've done. We did the resolution urging a ban on conversion therapy, and that passed 4-1, 5-0. I can't remember. It wasn't a divided 3-2. It was at least 4. So we have done it in the past. I don't think it's something that we necessarily need to do we could do one every week. Congratulations, Mike Lee, for not missing a vote last week. We could, but this is something too that, again, in the scheme of history, is going to be remembered, and it's going to be remembered kindly in Mitt Romney's favor. So that's just my point. It's a very historical event that we've witnessed, and he is one of our 2 United States senators, and I think that's what ties it into what we do as public officials.
I'm not going to rebut that, but if we are going to be adopting one every week, I want to get in line to rebuke Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, for choosing Devin Booker rather than Mike Connolly as an all-star. So put that on the list, Lisa.
You do that.
That's 2 of us that want it on the agenda.
Next meeting.
I second that motion.
Okay, other comments from council? May I ask the council if they would entertain a public comment? One additional one has arrived at Laura's email, and she can read it if you want.
I move that we open the hearing to receive the discussion to receive the public comment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive further public comment. All in favor, say aye.
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 Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, Laura, would you read the comment that you have, please?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The last comment I received is from Rebecca Withers. I too believe there is no reason for Midvale City to get involved in this political issue. It's only a personal preference by Councilmember Gettle, and this is not the proper arena to even discuss it. And that is the only additional comment I have. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, any other comment then?
My personal preference was that Jenny Wilson be our United States Senator. So that's what I will say to that public comment we just received.
All right. Rory, would you call the vote, please?
Mayor, I move that we, do we have to move to?
We need a motion first.
Oh, thank you.
And to end because we entered into public comments, do we need to?
Yes,
move
we
to
can do that. Go ahead.
Okay, I move that we go out of public comment session.
Second.
All right, we got a motion second to close public hearing on this public comments. All in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now, I need a motion.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2021 R22, a resolution commending Senator Mitt Romney for his impeachment vote as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I just want to point out that the 2 council members that are voting on this are up for re-election in a few months. And I just want to echo my previous comment about how this is by definition not partisan. And obviously it's not the most popular thing, and it just more feels like the right thing to follow up with. So, the people with the most at risk with this resolution are the ones that at least seem the most in favor for it. And I think that should be taken into sort of consideration for the thought process on this. But that's just my 2 cents.
Any other comments? Rory, ask the questions.
Okay, Council Member Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry,
No.
Glover,
His battery died.
oh no,
I think he dropped off.
okay. Robinson,
Yes.
hey,
All right.
motion passes 3-1.
All right, that motion passes then on a 3-1 vote.
Okay.
We'll now move to our other discussion items. An amendment to section 8.08.080, disposal of community refuse, bulky waste, and recyclable items to allow recycling services by authorized qualified entities. Garrett Wilcox, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. So this is a follow-up from the momentum recycling discussion that the council had back in December. At that time, Glenn raised the issue that we had some prohibitions in our current ordinance that would prevent momentum from immediately beginning this program. In reviewing this, Glenn was correct. As our ordinance is written, only the city or its agent, in this case ACE, would be able to collect, move, haul, or transport waste from residential units. And this is all waste. So even recycling programs, unless they're not conducted by the city or its agent, wouldn't be allowed. So the amendment that's come before you tonight is to allow this process to happen. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Unfortunately, this is going to be a very boring discussion. And you'll be looking at a lot of text. So this shows essentially the application process that someone would need to go through in order to receive authorization to collect recycling. We've tried to make this broader than just momentum recycling, so that way we wouldn't have to go back again if in the future some other company approached the city and said, we do something like electronic waste recycling and we'd like to start a program like that, or whatever it may be. We've tried to create this to be broad enough that other companies doing this type of work would be able to come and approach the city, and we wouldn't have to amend our ordinance. What we're trying to do is to make sure that anyone who makes an application has the adequate ability, if you will, to be able to follow through on what they're proposing. So we want to make sure that they will actually have a place to take the recycling material, and that they understand what recycling material they're going to be collecting, and to make sure that they're going to be doing it in a way that doesn't interfere with our current trash collection with ACE, as well as doesn't interfere directly with ACE's responsibilities and whatnot. So this first section just simply shows all of the things that we're requiring up front from any of these companies to come and approach the city. Moving on, if a company receives authorization from you as the city council to provide these services, we want to make sure that they are staying in contact enough with the city that there's some sort of accountability to you to make sure that these services are occurring in a good way. And so we require them to come back every 5 years under the proposal to make sure that they're accountable to you as the city council in providing a good service. We also require that they identify the type of recycling that they're doing so that they don't use this as a foothold to to get in and then expand their services into other things. And if they do choose to try to expand their service, they'll need to come back to you for additional authorization. We have some additional requirements about the collection bins and the collection vehicles. These are very much in line with our current ordinance standards for ACE or any other contractor that we would use to do garbage collection. We require that anyone who comes in must provide recycling collection services to any residential unit where the owner inhabitant is willing to enter into their standard service contract. And we prohibit hazardous waste without prior written consent. The last thing is well, not the last thing, but one of the things we made sure to include was the ability that if there are violations, that we would have the ability to revoke the authorization to make sure that there's, again, more instant accountability for what's going on. And then lastly, they would need to collect all their collection bins within a month if this were to ever terminate. And this also can't be used. We also included a line to prevent any confusion about whether or not this would make them an exclusive collector. In other words, in Momentum Recycling's case, this doesn't make them the exclusive collector of glass. Other people could come in and do so if they meet the qualifications. But for those who don't sign up for their service, it means that the city can continue to collect glass as part of their trash pickup service without any sort of conflicts. So that covers essentially the basics, if you will, of this ordinance. Does anyone have any specific questions?
Garrett, thanks to you and Lisa, if you helped out on this. I'm not sure who did the bulk of the work, but you know, I think we asked for a very like, hey, get us something that lets Momentum start doing glass recycling. And you guys took the extra effort of, you know, not just ensuring that they are able to do that if we choose to go that route, but, you know, we don't have to have this conversation for each and every subsequent person who might want to do this or something similar. So, you know, thanks for not just putting a Band-Aid on the issue. You guys surgically addressed the wound.
All Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett.
No, I can't take the credit. But again, I mean, the hope is to remove more of this work from you guys in the future and hopefully provide Public Works with the flexibility to have conversations without always having to come back to you.
Is the next step in the process then, because from our tour of Momentum, like they're ready to go. They have a Midvale City website sign up ready to go. Like they can, you know, start collecting glass in January or in March. So can you let us know what those next steps are? Are we going to get Momentum back here at our next council meeting, or how's that going to go?
So Jason is actually here on this right now. The next steps for the city would be to have to adopt this at the next city council meeting. If Momentum is prepared at that point and has provided all the things required in the application, I don't see any reason why they couldn't piggyback the ordinance and receive that authorization the same night. We haven't had that discussion with them yet, though, since we were waiting for further direction from the council, whether or not this met your needs or if there were tweaks that you would like to see.
Other questions for Garrett? Thank you, Garrett.
Good to me.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks then.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council.
Would it be okay if we put this on the consent agenda? Would anybody object to that?
I mean, I'd like Garrett to show up in a tie again and explain it all over, you know.
And the beard,
But-
the beard is new, right? The beard is new.
The beard is from COVID. So
It's COVID
probably,
related.
yeah.
COVID related. Okay.
So
But,
I guess this one time we can put it on the consent agenda so he doesn't have to do that again.
Your wish is my command. So if you want the whole presentation all over, I'm happy to do it for you. We'll just I'll just screenshot the this YouTube presentation and then send it back.
Fair enough.
Everyone okay with the consent agenda then next council meeting?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's
Good.
fine.
Thank you, Garrett. Our final discussion item is to discuss 2021 harvest days and approving events on city-owned property. Laura.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. I am sharing my screen, so I want to make sure everyone can see the Midvale City events with our very own police chief. Over on the left, can you see that screen? Yes, thank you very much. So tonight I'm going to be talking about Midvale City events, specifically if we want to start hosting events again and allowing events at our public facilities. So the reason that I brought this to our attention now is I had a meeting with the Association of City Event Planners, which is about 65 different representatives from cities all over the state of Utah. And we had a meeting with Salt Lake County, the events planning mass gathering permits person, and they announced that they are now issuing mass gathering permits again at Salt Lake County. And then they discussed some of the guidelines. If you remember way back in June of last year, when I came to council and suggested that we stop allowing events at city facilities, some of the reasons were we felt that the very, very strict guidelines that the state had were too difficult for our staff to follow up with and too difficult for even the event hosts to be able to follow up with. The state has relaxed on some of these guidelines, and I'm just going to go over some of the key guidelines that they've relaxed that I feel allow us to start allowing or planning for events again. One of the most important things is no matter what the size, the state asks people to complete the event planning template. This is a very good template that they created for event hosts to ensure that they are doing their best to protect the public, volunteers, staff, and performers. And it's a great template that tells you guidelines on the things that you need to do to ensure that everyone is safe. They are no longer requiring contact tracing for of all events. That would be really hard for us at Midvale City Park because we couldn't trace people that are coming in all different areas, all different entrances. So that was one of the challenges we had, but they're no longer requiring that for free events. They're only requiring that for events that you need to buy tickets because it's a lot easier to track someone when they have to buy tickets. They do require symptom checking only for volunteers, staff, and performers, but you do have to have signs up to remind people that they can't enter the park if they're exhibiting any symptoms, and you have to have a lot of signage to ensure people are social distancing. Food trucks are allowed. However, guests are not allowed to walk around the park and eat or drink. They must be sitting at the tables to eat or drink, and we have to sanitize those tables frequently. The food trucks are required to ensure that they are having their clients or their customers are social distancing. So that's not up to the city, that's actually up to the food trucks. But we have to make sure that they're doing that as well. We have to ensure that guests remain in small groups. And I thought it was kind of interesting how they even pointed out that they used to say households. Now they're trying to say small groups because they realized that a lot of people have created what we call COVID pods, the same people that you've been hanging out with throughout COVID. And that's okay. You need to stay within that small COVID pod. And they say, more than about the size of a carload. Well, what kind of car? But about the size of a carload. So we need to make sure that our guests are staying in small groups and they're not gathering in big groups. And we need to follow ensure that everyone's following the social distancing guidelines. We also need to provide accommodations for high-risk individuals. ensure everyone's wearing face masks and that we offer face masks. I already discussed extra signage. We need to have extra restrooms, hand washing stations, and hand sanitizer. Believe it or not, this is a lot less stringent than it was at the beginning. So we believe that we can allow events. Harvest Days considerations. Do we want to host Harvest Days this year? If we do, we're going to have to make sure that we have additional volunteers and paid staff, because I don't want to have our volunteers having to enforce things like making sure people are wearing their masks, making sure people are staying in their COVID pods. I think that's something more that paid staff should do. And then we also need help sanitizing high touch areas, directing people on where they can sit, just all the type of traffic control that we would need, and performing symptom checking on volunteer staff and performers. Vendors, we need to limit vendors. Last Harvest Days, there was 100 vendors. So I would recommend limiting it to about 40, maybe 50, so that we can really spread it out. We are allowed to have bounce houses. That surprised me. We just have to make sure that they're doing proper hand sanitizing. And as far as the concert goes, my suggestion would be, if we move forward with Harvest Days, instead of paying for a big band like Bellamy Brothers or a big band that costs $10,000, that we bring in smaller local bands. That way, if we have to cancel, we're not losing a $5,000 deposit or even more than that. So that would be my suggestion. Could that affect turnout? Maybe it could. Maybe it could affect turnout, but I'm also not sure. All of the ACE folks and myself talked about, I wonder if people are even going to be coming to events, or if they're going to be still too afraid to come to events. So it's going to be a little bit challenging for our planning, but we can do it. Baby Goat Yoga, the county went and did some special investigating to make sure that's okay. And I'm happy to say they approved Baby Goat Yoga. We can do that again this year if we want to. It's very popular. Block parties. We should consider requiring them to do the event planning templates, so that they know the types of different things that they'll need to do to ensure that all of the neighbors are safe. Bingo, I think it's feasible since we have the big new amphitheater. Maybe we should require tickets or reservations or something like that to ensure we're not overcrowded, but we'll need a good sound system. Movie night, I don't see that as a problem. People stay in small pods anyways. And the Harvest Days parade, I talked to Lindsay Ellsmore, the parade chair, on this. She feels comfortable moving forward with the parade because it's outside. The only concerns I have is we have to ensure social distancing. And if you've ridden down the parade, you know how people get together with their families and friends, and it's big groups of people sitting together in a very long distance, and the police are already really busy with traffic control. So who would make sure we ensure social distancing and that people are wearing masks? That's going to be very challenging. Honestly, our float, we don't have it in the budget to update this year. And we haven't updated our float because we didn't think, we didn't want to spend the money and waste the money. So we don't have a float to be able to put in the parade. And we would be required to have a lot of additional restrooms and hand washing stations throughout the parade route. And I'm not sure if it's going to be difficult to recruit float participants. I know some cities have decided not to do a float this year, just like we did. But some cities are doing what they call a reverse float, where the floats can come and sit kind of like we did for the Halloween trunk or treat along Bingham Junction Boulevard, where we could park people out and people can drive by and look at the floats. I just am trying to think of a nice, safe area that we can do that again, for people to drive by slowly and to be able to look at the floats. So those are the considerations we need to think about. Harvest Days is Saturday, August 7th. And if we do the block parties, the week before that, and bingo night that Thursday, those are the dates for Harvest Days. I wanted to go over the budget really quick to show you it's not a huge difference if we decide to budget this. The typical budget for Harvest Days is $73,000. With not needing such an expensive band, I would suggest we budget $9,000 for the band instead of $17,000. That's not just the band, that's several bands, DJs, and other entertainment like the magician. So the equipment, we're still going to need the same equipment for everything. The fireworks, I've already reserved the date. with our firework company, and that's still gonna be 13,000. The kids' activities are still gonna be 5,000. Supplies and advertising. We'll save some money, but we're gonna have to spend more money on signs, so I think it's still gonna be 8,000. Permits would still be the same. You have to make a decision if you want to do youth ambassadors, that's a part of the Harvest Days budget. If you want to cut out the parade, that would save $3,000. So the budget would be 65,000 with a less expensive band, or 62,000. I don't know where the 300 came from, but 62,000 for the less expensive band and no parade. So that is budget considerations. But we do need to still put into the budget the $12,000, and I've included this within this total budget. Even though we're not going to have a float this year, we need the money in the budget for 2022, for in the next budget year for the 2022 Harvest Days float parade for 2022. So we would have to keep that in the budget because we pay for that in like January of 2022. So before I move on to the events at city-owned facilities that are not hosted by the city, I wanted to know if you had any input or questions on the Harvest Days budget. Do you want to proceed with Harvest Days? Any concerns, questions that you may have?
Laura, this is Councilmember Brown. I'm assuming that this isn't what the guidelines are going to be by August, right? Can we make that assumption by the way things are trending? So I don't mind the idea of doing Harvest Days or anything along those lines. My question is enforcement. Like, I personally think the rule that you can't walk and drink is like one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. So, but let's say someone isn't following that, right? Like, who gets in trouble for that? The individual or the city that's sponsoring it?
The host that's sponsoring it. If they will be monitoring any event that has a mass gathering permit, and they said that if you are not abiding by the rules, they will advise you can't host an event for a whole year.
Like until next Harvest Days?
Yeah.
That's fine with me. Okay. I think it's going to be a lot looser by the time it comes up.
I agree.
And it probably should be, because if we have several million people vaccinated, it should at least loosen some of these. So I don't know. A lot of people want it back, so I'd like it back, but I'm speaking just for myself. I don't know if other council members want to chime in.
I would actually really like to have it back. My concern is does this budget, I mean, I realize that things will probably look different by then, but does this budget include the additional funds needed for the additional restrooms and hand washing stations and hand sanitizing stations?
Yes, because I could go down a little bit on the sound and lights. We wouldn't need such expensive sound and lights when we're not having Bellamy Brothers. So there, yeah, we can save money there. That's a good question.
I just want to say I love that we consider Bellamy Brothers like a big band. I just want to say that. Now that Kane's leaving, I'm just going to talk bad about them forever.
The larger, the more expensive the band, the more on their rider they require specific sound and lights. So we could save some money on that.
Laura, as someone who has participated in the professional wrestling event twice now at 2 different Harvest Days, is that something that we're going to have again, or is that a no-no as far as the state or the county goes?
So fortunately, the wrestling team that we work with is very, very flexible. So I think that we could like put them on hold, hoping that the regulations change. But as of right now, today, we could not have wrestling, and we can't have dancing either.
Well, they kind of go hand in hand.
Right.
So no wrestling, no walking with drinks.
And no dancing.
And
it's
no
like
dancing.
Footloose.
I feel like we're in Footloose.
Right?
But I really needed to get my comeuppance this year. 4 years ago, I was on the losing end. Or no, I got my comeuppance the second time. Okay, never mind. I'm good.
Okay.
I hope we can have it because the kids do tend to like it, and I'm one of those kids.
Okay.
I shared what I saw in the news a couple of weeks ago about New Orleans, where they are not having their Mardi Gras parade, or didn't. It's time over now. but they had what they called a Yardy Gras, where the people decorated their front yards, and then the citizens walked the streets and viewed the presentations on the front lawns and fences and porches, and the people would sit on the front porch and they'd still toss out the beads to the passersby. And, we could do something like that too, and just let people decorate their front yards, and the rest of us could walk around a circuit and see them.
That sounds like fun, Mayor.
We can do a yardist days.
I agree that I think we ought to go forward with it. I mean, we can always cancel at the end if we have to, but I think things are going to loosen up. And I do apologize. I lost connection right as I was supposed to vote. I am in Colorado and not really where I usually am. So,
Do you want to go on record to vote?
I would like to be on record that I voted no, and I would like to know what the vote was.
That would make it 3-2 for the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
So the questions I have is, do you want us to try to proceed with the parade, hoping that the restrictions will loosen up? That's a lot of work for Lindsay and us, but we are definitely open to doing it. It's up, but we want to leave that up to your discretion.
My opinion, we go forward with it.
Great.
I think that we should do some, maybe not full steam. I don't think we should go back to the full harvest days that we had 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but we can ease back into having something.
Okay. I will tell you, we did a survey of all those cities in the area. Actually throughout Utah, and it was about 80% people are moving forward, but at a smaller scale, and 20% they're just not gonna move forward at all. So that was a good learning experience for us too. Okay, and then what about youth ambassadors? Do you want to put that back in the budget again? Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
I think
and you understand the idea about hiring less expensive bands, so if we have to cancel at the last minute, we don't lose so much money. That's okay with everyone?
Yeah, also I think it'd be great if we looked at some local bands.
Yes. I am attending on March 13th, if that's a Saturday, whatever that Saturday is. I think it's the 13th. And I invited Bob Bador is attending from the Arts Council. The ACE Association does an entertainment event where they bring in a different local band every 15 minutes. And we just hear quick. And so we find some real good bands, local bands, during that. So I'm excited to be participating in that. And we're going to have, I think there's going to be a virtual link. So if any of you want to take a look at it, let me know and I'll send you the link.
Would you send me that link, please?
I absolutely will.
Thank you.
I will send it to everyone in case you decide that day that you want to take a listen. Okay, the next thing we wanted to talk about is city-owned facilities, allowing events at city-owned facilities. We have several groups that are waiting for a response from us. The most recent one coming up is the Midvale Criterion. This is something that Chris Butte has been working on with this group. It's a very well-known national group, according to Chris, and they want to do a criterium, which would be run around a loop along Main Street and Holden. And that would be on May 22nd. According to the county, we can do bike races. And this particular group has done recent races in Arizona and other areas throughout the country where they've had to accommodate to ensure that they are keeping the participants and the people who are watching as safe as possible. And then the Arts Council Summer Concert Series, they're wanting to know if they could host a concert series. I feel it's safe because people can separate in a big area along the grass, because they do this outside every Friday night in Midvale City Park at the amphitheater. They didn't ask me specifically about productions at the Performing Arts Center, but I wanted to talk about that as well, and if they could rent out the amphitheater as well. I just want to know what we want to do for that. And then the Cruisers for Kids car show is held August 21st. And as you know, these events take a long time to plan. So they're holding their breath right now, waiting for us to give them answers on if they can start planning for these. So I wanted to bring these to your attention. Now, I did ask if we're holding these, say the Criterium holds this at City Hall, we are not hosting the event. We're not the event sponsor. We're just allowing them to use our facilities. Who's responsible to ensure that they're all following COVID guidelines? And they made it very clear that the event sponsors, not the city, are required to ensure that they're following the event guidelines. One thing I would recommend, we have a special events permit that we require these types of events to fill out in community development. One thing that I would recommend is during COVID, at least for the next year, that we require them to fill out the state's event planning template, because it really does help them think through things and think through ideas to make sure that everyone's safe. That's one thing I would recommend. So if you have any questions on these events or anything else, I would be happy to answer any questions.
How about the summer concert series? How does that affect the Arts Council?
They really want to host the summer concert series. I'm sure Councilmember Brown can talk a little bit more about that, but they like I said, they've been waiting for an answer on this as well. Okay. That starts in June.
Yeah, we want to do the concert series, but part of it is just sort of understanding the city's expectations and what our requirements are. They're planning on finding artists for it. I can't remember the exact direction we were going, even though we talked about this last night. But yeah, the goal is hopefully we can feel comfortable doing it without it being too big of a burden on the Arts Council with all the requirements, that Laura talked about earlier. But yeah.
And I'll help them with that for sure when it comes time for them to, yes. So do we want to proceed and allow city events as early as even May?
Personally, I think if they can meet the requirements that we ought to do it. I think we need to get life back to normal.
I like the idea of the bike race and same thing. If we can, start getting things back to normal, at least planning for it, would be good.
Okay, great. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, thank you for your time. I appreciate your input.
Thank you, Laura. Looks like you've got a busy spring ahead of you. Okay, that's the final item I have, except for one final one.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.